Welcome, everybody. This is part of a continuing series we try to do where we talk to political candidates across the spectrum. Here in California, a little bit outside California, we have an incredible show for you today. Largely, the topic is going to be this. How should California react to Trump's re-election? Is it bad? Is it good? We'll have a political panel at 2 and an academic panel at 3. How should California respond in the age of Trump? We're going to have a political panel right now at 2 with 2020 Libertarian candidate for president Adam Kokesh, Democratic Party candidate for governor Jackie McGowan, Democratic candidate for governor John Drake, Green Party candidate for governor Veronica Fimbres, Green Party candidate Dan Kapelovitz, Leo Zaki. Let me introduce you to some of the people here. We have Adam Kokesh. He was famously a 2020 Libertarian candidate for president. We also have Jackie McGowan. She was a Democratic Party candidate for president. John Drake should be here. He's also a Democratic Party candidate for governor. And my favorite, Green Party candidate for governor. And let's not forget the incredible run for insurance commissioner by Veronica Fimbres. Very pleased. Green Party candidate for governor Dan Kapelovitz. There he is. Nice smile. And mayor of Santa Monica and founder of the CA Green Party, Mike Feinstein. We also have Republican candidate for governor Leo Zaki. There he is. Now, you may not recognize him because Leo Zaki now has a beard. I'll point him out when we do the video. But I'll point him out so in case anybody gets confused. And finally, we're going to have on 2 different panels, part of the American Solidarity Party, Professor James Hanink. Thank you all for being with us while we answer this important question: how should California respond to Trump's return? Because we have limited time, we're going to go first to Adam Kokesh. So for everybody following along, I'm going to interview each of these people for about 3 to 5 minutes. They're going to give their unedited opinion on how they view it, and then we'll have a discussion. I can tell you the discussion was already happening before we even got to the event. So this is going to be a live event. All of you know that there's a variety of opinions. There's strong emotional opinions here in California, but while we want you to express that, we want it to be a productive debate that, let's keep it PG-13, not G, but PG-13. Okay, first we're going to go to Adam Kokesh. Adam, for a few minutes, about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll go to Leo Zaki next so we can spread it around. Adam, how should people in California respond to the return of Trump? No problem, everything's going to be great, or, oh my God, this is the end of California life as we know it. Your opinion, unedited, unaltered, sir.
Well, I will do my best to directly answer that question, but first, a couple preliminary points. Are you trying to say that Californians are emotional people, Marcus? How dare you? How dare you suggest that emotion plays a role in California politics? Now, a couple other premises about your introduction to me. I live in Arizona. I was born and raised in California, and I'm one of those who was like, yeah, don't want to deal with the California state government. I'm going to buy 10 acres in the mountains and start my homestead and be independent as possible there. Recently, formally declared independence, named myself the king of the independent microstate of the Garden of Freedom. And I do my best to live by principles off-grid in a self-sustainable, truly ethical lifestyle. And then it is absolutely true. I did run for president as a Libertarian for the nomination, at least in 2020. Although I don't know if I like being associated with either the Libertarian Party or people who have run for president at this point, as my platform, as you know, was to dissolve the federal government in a peaceful, orderly bankruptcy process, leaving us with 50 independent states and the territories, et cetera. And that would be a way to distribute in a reasonably equitable way all of the wealth that has been stolen from us by the centralized authority that is the federal government. I also don't take responsibility and have not been involved with the Libertarian Party for at least the last 2 years in any direct way. and have some. Don't want any of that as an albatross for me in this debate. But then to answer your question, I'm first going to destroy the premise, and in the sense that how should California react, or even Californians? It really comes down to not seeing yourself as part of a forced larger collective, but a principled individual human being. And so I would say that there are certain things, yes, the collective of California faces as unique challenges that it will face as the institution, or through the institution of the state of California government in that collective. But as individuals, I think it's more important to ask yourself why these things are important to you, why your principles that you take into politics motivate you, and then really scrutinize your own life. Are you living up to those principles and where you have chosen to live, who you choose to work for, how you choose to interact with your neighbors, your fellow human beings and Californians, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, it's really up to the individual, as I have always been about localization of power. But that gets me to answering your question directly, in that California, or Californians, do have a great opportunity to react as a collective to Trump's reelection, and in a sense take advantage of the emotional momentum of the masses, so to speak, in California, and say, we have some people who really do want us as political leaders in the state of California, speaking about the rest of the panel, not myself here, to serve those people by saying, we are going to assert independent policy as California. And of course, Marcus, my ultimate answer would be, do what Marcus says and break away from the rest of the country.
Okay. We got that. We're going to go to, thank you. We're going to go to Leo Zaki, then we'll go to Mike Feinstein. Or who did I say was going to go next?
You said me when you
okay.
That's fine.
Mike, we're going to go to you right after Leo. We're going to go to Leo, then we'll go to Mike. Leo Zaki, and thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. We're trying to get everybody's opinion as you see it. Let me find your name. Leo.
Well, I edited mine for it was not an unedited opinion. I am sensitive to the emotional Californians who are with me.
I appreciate it. You're emotionally a Californian. I appreciate that.
Yes, I am. You can get the Marine out of California, but you can't get the California all the way out of the Marine.
And despite our heritage as being peaceniks, Californians love their Marines. They love their Marine Corps. We love.
I love my Marines, my comrades, my fellow comrades.
We do. Hey, Jackie, thanks for joining. We're going to go to Leo Zaki now. Hi. Jackie just joined us. Thank you for being here, Jackie McGowan. Appreciate it. You look great. Leo, for just about 3 to 5 minutes, how should, in your opinion, people in California respond to the return of Trump? Good, bad, nothing to worry about, or watch out? In your opinion, you're a Californian, but you're a Republican. You know how people here feel, but you've also been here. How should people feel, in your opinion, straight up, Leo?
Personally, obviously I'm a Republican, so I'll have a bias towards this, but with open arms. Trump isn't here to change the way you live your personal day-to-day life. He's not here to take away your rights. He's not here to limit your bodily autonomy. He's not here to change your marriage rights or any rights or freedoms or liberties that you have here as an American. He's here to do the job as the president, which is to do what's best for all Americans. He's here to fix the economy. He's already working prior as president-elect to help bring peace around the world. He's already helping negotiate a ceasefire in the Middle East and in Russia and Ukraine. So he's here to bring peace and promote prosperity in this country. And we should focus on that. And of course, a lot of folks are heavily influenced by mainstream media, and mainstream media is going to push the whole Trump bad, orange man bad thing and poke at, oh, well, look, all these judgments against him, all these court dates, all these things. We all get wrapped up in this, and it's all just a bunch of lies. That a lot of it falls flat on its face. It's why you're seeing these judges drop these cases, drop these charges. It's all just been a way to try to stop him from being elected. And so it's unfortunately misconstrued a lot of thoughts around the country, especially here in California, of how he's this horrible, evil person. And that's quite the contrary to who he is. He's a very generous man that cares and wants to do what's right by the people, for the people. And it's not about enriching himself or getting out of trouble because, well, he's not in trouble, or enriching his friends. It's about enriching all of the Americans and empowering all of the Americans, making us freer and more transparent. I mean, look who he's putting in. He's putting Kash Patel to run the FBI. What's he going to do? He's going to make the FBI actually go and pursue criminals. That's going to make us safer. He's going to release, top secret classified documents about events that have taken place here in this country, things that our government absolutely has lied to us about. And I'm really excited to see him partnering with people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., someone who considers himself, was a Democrat, has now run as an independent. And his whole premise is about making America healthy again, removing the poisons and the chemicals in our food and our water. I mean, these are all very positive things that we need to be focused on as a Californian, as someone who's been in the agriculture industry, a provider of food. This is something that my family always held near and dear to our hearts. We were the largest organic turkey producer in the nation. We pioneered antibiotic-free in poultry. This is what we want to do. We want to have healthy lives. We want to have safe communities. We want to have a better education system, and we want to limit and essentially do away with as much of the bureaucracy as possible. Anytime people have been hearing on the news about, he's going to bring about an end to democracy, if you just replace the word democracy with whatever they're saying, with when they're speaking, with the word bureaucracy, and you will actually see the real truth behind who's holding everything in place. It's this bureaucracy that is wastefully spending our tax money that we give to the government, and it gets wasted. It doesn't get used properly. They send it overseas. We're taking care of people that are here illegally, which is a crime. And again, we're the Republican Party, people that support and like Donald Trump aren't against immigrants and immigration. We're against people coming here illegally and unvetted. We want folks to come here the right way. It's about doing it safely, correctly, and ethically. And what's fair, right? Everybody wants fairness. I mean, life isn't fair, but we want to bring about as much of a fair playing field as possible. So people should welcome him with open arms and look at the positives. A lot of people like to point out negatives and harp on negativity. Why not try to find the good and see what the potential is and what the possibilities are? And I really think that they are really limitless. And I don't see a negative impact. Again, this isn't about changing the way you live, who you love, what you do. It's about making things affordable and safer and healthier and just improving the quality of life for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you giving that perspective. We want to show that there's a range of perspectives. Thank you, Leo. We're going to come back and we're going to have everybody talk. Right now, we're going to go to Mike. Mike Feinstein, you were the mayor of Santa Monica. You also helped get started the California Green Party wing. How do you view the necessary reaction of Californians? You've been here a long time in California. How should Californians react to Trump, in your opinion?
Marcus, thanks for pulling this together. 10 counties in California went for Trump in 2024 that didn't in 2020. Biden won the state by 5 million in 2020, Harris only by about 3.2 million. So there's a lot of satisfaction to the Democrats' approach. Working class who didn't believe the Democrats paid attention to them. But I think not only was that a fault of the national Democratic ticket, but it reflects some concerns here in the state of California about the quality of life and the lack of voice. And I think those are two levels that we have to address. I don't think Trump offers viable solutions. A trickle-down, unregulated corporate economy is not something that I find compelling. So what is a more inclusive and more effective response in our state? One of the main crises we face is affordable housing. It affects livability. It affects our unhoused crisis. And we have these demands from the state for cities to develop a lot of housing, but we don't provide funding for it. So I think we have to look more comprehensively at our tax code. We've had several task forces on the state level to look at our tax code and bring it up to date. But then those task forces are just put on the shelf after they're done. We have the fiscalization of land use in our state where big box sales makes money for cities and housing increased costs. And therefore we get bad development policies where we have a disincentive to build housing because it increases the cost for local government. And we have to be revisiting that. So one of the things I would like to see us do is when we revisit our tax code to try and get out of our boom and bust situation. The rainy day fund approach by itself is a kind of short-term backstop against the boom and bust, but it's not really sustainable. So we're ending up funding by ballot box initiatives to different causes, but we don't have steady income streams. So I'd like to look at that. Number two, we need to increase the use of public banks in the state. A lot of the investment money doesn't go for public needs, and the creation of public banks, not just in cities, but on a state level, would allow us to put public dollars, not getting them from Wall Street, but taking our own money and recycling it in our own economy for local needs. I think we could be addressing housing more significantly that way, and that would have a runoff effect on a lot of our problems. And also, I think we should be incentivizing land trusts and getting housing out of just the commercial profit market and keeping housing in an affordable way for the long term. In terms of inclusivity, we have this terrible top two election system here in California that limits general election choice to only two choices. The minor parties are knocked off the ballot, and fortunately there's a lawsuit now that is probably going to knock top two out in California. And I think this is the time to look at going to proportional representation elections. In proportional representation elections, instead of electing one person per legislative district and having everybody who didn't vote for that person get no representation, instead what you do is, if a party gets 10% of the vote, they get 10% of the seats, because you elect people out of multi-party districts. Now, the approach that I think would be most appropriate for California, and what I pushed when I ran for California Secretary of State in 2018, is we are a state of regions, in that we have large macroeconomic, macro bioregional regions. The Central Valley is different than the Bay Area, etc. And right now, we only pick representation from individual single seat districts, and we don't have a public process to develop a regional point of view and then bring regional points of view into the state government. And in picking regional points of view, not just a Democrat or a Republican, but a mix of both and people from the minor parties. One of the things that makes people unhappy with policies we're getting from the state government, including on housing, is we have one-size-fits-all approaches and unfunded mandates. Well, if we have more regional input into our state government through a state of regions-based proportional representation system, then you could actually develop more regionally appropriate approaches to our housing, our transportation, our economics, and other related issues. So for me, and then when you look at California independence and the people who wanted to have the Jefferson independent state, I think having more regional proportional representation districts is a way of giving people more of a voice from where they live and seeing it represented in Sacramento. So my response to a Trump presidency is look why people voted differently. And I don't think the answer is just to swing from Republicans to Democrats, but look at how we develop a better quality of life in the state. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to go to Veronica. Veronica, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you very good. Veronica was a Green Party candidate for governor and insurance commissioner. We're going to go, by the way, we're going to go Veronica, James Hanink, then Dan, then Jackie. I think is how that should work. Okay. Veronica, how should people respond now that Trump's president, he's returned? You're a lifelong Californian. You're a minority on multiple scales. How should we respond to Trump returning? Everything's going to be just fine, or there's reason to be concerned? Your opinion.
There is great reason to be concerned. First, I'd like to thank Adam for his service in the Marines. Thank you for your service, comrade.
Serving bankers, politicians, and war profiteers, but for intention, thank you.
I think that we should be shocked. I know the day after the election, I went to work. I work in the Castro, probably one of the gayest places in San Francisco. I work at a clinic. I'm a nurse and many things, and so it was scary and eerie to see the people's faces in the Castro the day after the election, they all looked like they had given 5 or 6 pints of blood. They just look gone and terrorized and horrified and stuff. And I was feeling not down, but I was just amazed. It amazed me because some people think that ignorance is bliss. And there's nothing blissful about being ignorant. If you look at the facts, and I'm a factual person, I like the facts. The facts tell you. While I like Leo Zacky's chicken, I don't like anything that he said because I, Mr. Zacky, I love you, but your policies. I'm a Black trans woman. He's gone after trans people, and what Kamala Harris did was follow his laws that were on the books regarding trans prisoners having feminization surgery and whatever they were having. So she was following the law under Donald Trump. And they played that for all the men, and men that act so terrified are the misogynistic men, the men that are transphobic, and they need to get a lot of that stuff straight. So me, I'm terrified because what am I going to do? They're coming after me. I have a sign and a target and everything on my back because I'm a trans woman. Yet I'm a valuable, viable member of society. I think that the policies that, I mean, look at the people he's trying to put in this cabinet. All of them are, quite a few of them have sexual deviations from pederasts to whatever. They've attacked women. They have no regard for women. They treat women like second-class citizens, almost like The Handmaid's Tale. They want women to act like that. I know it's okay, Leo. I'm not drinking the same Kool-Aid you are, but they really don't want people to have any say or any voice. They don't want us to matter, and we matter as human beings. If you just look at the humanity. So yeah, Californians have a just right to worry about the way things are in our state because of the way things have been and the way things, the future that we're looking to. That's why people in NATO are concerned, because Trump tried to do away with NATO before. All the stuff that Leo mentioned was, I don't know, it was brought on by the Kool-Aid, I guess. But none of that stuff is actually factual. And that if they want to talk about trans people going into the women's bathroom and they're worried about genitalia so bad, and most of the Republicans that do all that are the ones that get caught doing all that, from tapping their foot in the men's bathroom to everything else. People like Caitlyn Jenner, they're morons. They have no idea. They can't speak for the trans people. She's the biggest buffoon I've ever seen, and she wanted to charge $40 to come here for people to see her. See her do what? See her exist? I told her, don't come to my city, don't come to my state, but she lives here. But don't come to my city. But, because what are you coming for? Nobody cares about you. You don't tell the real story. The real story is that transgender people they were adored in other cultures. In India and Africa, they were held on pedestals, and now we're scared. We're scared because we've been beaten up. Black trans women are killed all the time. And I'm surprised I made it to 72. I'm thankful that I did, because I got to see all this go down. So I think that people in California should be concerned about human rights, rights of those underserved, the homeless population, housing concerns, like Mike said. All of those things matter. And I think that we should be frightened. We should be very frightened. And if there's a way to pull back, I'm all for leaving. the other states if we have to, because California, even though we consider ourselves so progressive, we're not. Minnesota was the first state that passed transgender rights. And had we been had foresight and stuff, I would have been the first transgender governor in the United States had they had foresight, or I would have been the first insurance commissioner, a transgender insurance commissioner. But they don't have foresight; they have tunnel vision, and that's what's messed up about California and the United States. Period. Did you want me to say more, Marcus?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Veronica. Appreciate that. We're going to go to Leo. Now, hold on. Leo, you get to respond for 2 minutes. I want to have the discussion part. We still need to interview some people. So
absolutely.
Named. Leo gets to talk for 2 minutes, and then we're going to go right back to interviewing. It'll be Professor Hanink, then Dan Kapelovitz, and then Jackie. Leo, for 2 minutes, real quick response. Since you were called by name, how would you like to respond, sir?
I just think that everything that Veronica that you mentioned was all hyper fixated on one, super subculture, of our society. Everything you hyper fixated on was about transgenderism and how that you believe that Trump and the Republicans are going to go after him or after them. It's really not what our focus is as Republicans. When you talk about bathroom things and the fixation on genitalia, what the concern is, from a Republican perspective is that folks who have daughters that are cisgendered, as MX Self-Destruct would label us, I think that's a very rude word, is that we don't want to have our daughters exposed to male genitalia. We also believe that it's inappropriate to have that. It's a space that's specified for separate sex or genders. We can interchange those words how you like. In our worldview, which has been the biological worldview, which is the only view, that there are two genders. Whether you present a certain way, dress a certain way, identify a certain way is irrelevant to what you are born as. There is no changing that. And to have an argument that you can change as you will, in our opinion, which is reality, is that it is just absolutely incorrect and insane. There are two genders. There have only ever been two genders. There will only ever continue to be two genders. So again, hyperfixating on that and ignoring all the other.
So what about children that are born with one?
Let's stop. I'm sorry. I apologize.
All the other things you ignored, like safety, the economy, education, health, the quality of health here in our country. Those were all topics that you completely overlooked and focused on. For you, as someone who identifies that way, was very selfish and self-serving. And there are a lot more people in this country and in California.
All right, we're gonna stop.
Yeah, let's get to the intro so we can really let them have at it, Marcus.
Okay, we're gonna stop there. I know Veronica has some comments. Leo, I want to say thanks for coming out, man. I know it's not super easy in California. I know how we are. Veronica, thank you too. Veronica, you're going to get a response, but I just want to be fair to everybody, okay? We're going to go to Hanink, then Dan, then Jackie, and then we will have the panel discussion. Please hold on, Veronica. We're going to let everybody speak, but I just want to be fair to everybody. So
please do.
Thank you. We're going to go to Hanink now for 3 to 5 minutes. Professor, as you see it, how should people respond in your opinion? Let me pull up your cue here. Part of the American Solidarity Party. How do you think Californians should respond? I think you're kind of mixed, but you're somewhat on the conservative scale, but you are a Californian. You have been here for a while. So how do you think people should respond? Professor James Hanink, 3 to 5 minutes.
I think that crisis brings opportunity. As a convicted felon, Donald belongs in jail. However, he's not the worst of all presidents. After all, he didn't drop atomic bombs on anyone. So that's worth considering. And we all know that California is where the future happens first. So, what sort of future? We, yes, us, can contribute mightily to America, but we have to take it easy with cursing the darkness, however tempting that can be, and we have to spend more time lighting candles. And that means, I think, some pivot points, and I'd like to share with you 4 pivot points. Let's stop tolerating the highest child and family poverty rate in the country. We're right now at 18.9%. Instead, what we should do is work to make family-friendly policy choices, good ones. And let's stop promoting abortion tourism and assisted suicide. Instead, let's support pregnancy help centers and palliative and hospice care. And that's 2 pivot points, 2 more. Let's end the University of California's role in developing the nuclear weapon arsenal. Let's stop flat its complicity with the threat to use weapons of mass destruction. And let's quit cozying up to venture capitalists. Let's break our dependence on venture capitalists. Instead, let's promote and fund worker ownership. I have SB 1407 in mind. So those were 4 pivot points, and I also have 3 creative proposals. Proposal number 1, rescue voters insulted by billions spent on nonstop propaganda. Kamala Harris, in the last 15 weeks of her campaign, dropped $1.5 billion. Musk alone spent $200 million on the Donald. And here in my district, District 35, Richardson versus Chambers, state senator, $7.6 million spent. A race for state senator, $7.6 million. And it was all negative advertising, and it was all funded by mainstream organization and mainstream politicians. They got in for it from top to bottom. Now, if Marcus will extend a little bit more time to me, some creative proposals to continue. How's about having carefully done nonpartisan legislative analysis, issue by issue, candidate by candidate, and make this analysis widely available in public venues of every sort, ranging from libraries to pool halls, where my oldest son works. Doesn't go into the library all that much. And long-term, but core, promote the shared common good in which no human being is expendable. How? Principle of solidarity. The first measure of justice in every society is how it treats the most vulnerable. How? Principle of decentralism. Begin with the grassroots. Work your way forward, but begin with the grassroots. And lastly, economic democracy. We need to move to an ownership society. We need to have the widest possible distribution of goods and resources. Focus on housing first. Without economic democracy, political democracy is an illusion.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll stop there. We're going to go now to Dan Kapelovitz. Thank you, Professor. Dan, how should Californians feel about the return of Trump? You are a Green Party member that's a little bit more on the left. You've been here in California. You've been a lawyer. You know something about the California government, the California legal system, and obviously as a Californian. in your opinion, unedited, unaltered, how do you think Californians should respond to the return of Donald Trump? Dan Kapelowitz.
All right. Well, first of all, people shouldn't freak out. I do want to point out a couple things sort of off topic. One is I'm not sure if Trump can constitutionally be president because, at least according to him, he won in 2020, which means this will be his third term, which is against the Constitution. So we may want to explore that legal challenge. Also, I don't think he's actually technically been convicted yet. He's been found guilty. But once he is convicted, he won't be able to own firearms under the federal law, and which means that he can't even operate nuclear weapons or have control of them, or even his Secret Service, they're under his constructive control. So I don't know how that's going to work out. But those are just two things I've been thinking about. I think Biden should grant amnesty to all immigrants before he's out of office. And I think he should pardon all nonviolent federal inmates, criminals, so-called criminals. Now, with California, there are a lot of things we can do. We can become a sanctuary state and not cooperate with federal law enforcement to deport people, throw people in cages who just want a better life. I have no problem with open borders. Who cares? We should be able to go into Canada. People are now trying to move to Canada, and it's not that easy because they have even more strict laws than we do. And if you commit some minor crime like decades ago, sometimes you can never go into Canada, which means you're deprived of even seeing a part of the earth. So if you believe in God, you should not believe in man-made borders. You should believe that we all can go anywhere we want. Who cares? So that's one thing we could do in terms of California, be a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state. And also, I don't know about what's going to happen with abortion tourism or whatever, but we do need to maybe file some lawsuits if they are going to go after people from states where abortion is illegal, and if they're going to come to California to get a legal abortion. And if that becomes illegal, that's all going to have to be worked out in the courts. We should obviously fight not to prosecute people who come to California for legal abortions. So these are all things California can do. We are the leaders in a lot of areas, environmentally sometimes. And sometimes because we're so huge, we're about 1/8 the population of the United States. So if we dictate that cars have to be a certain way or whatever, then people are going to follow. So there are all kinds of things that California itself can do. I'm not so into seceding, because then you're giving, the rest of the nation to, it's going to then lean way more right. So I'm not into, I know we're on the Cal Exit platform, but I'm not into seceding. And in terms of the transgender, I mean, it's who cares? It's so ridiculous. I've used male bathrooms all my life, and I don't think I've ever seen someone else's genitalia, and no one else has seen my genitalia. I'm not a flasher. That's illegal. If you are a flasher and you show your genitalia in any kind of bathroom for sexual pleasure, that is our crime. If you go into a stall, go to the bathroom, it's not a crime. So I can't believe this congressperson who is not being allowed to use the bathroom of their choice. And this is absurd. And I was in college, we had co-ed bathrooms. It was not a problem. People aren't, unless you're a pervert, it's not a problem. And the average person, at least I know, is not a pervert. So they go in the stall, they face the urinal, whatever. Who cares? It should all just be one bathroom anyway. And I prefer actually everyone had private bathrooms, but whatever. That's a little more expensive. But so I think that's just absurd. It's not, and in terms of, I don't know what the actual law is in terms of paying for, surgeries for prisoners, but I can tell you, I know women prisoners, and believe me, they would like it if some of the inmates there had the surgery to remove their genitalia. So maybe it would be valuable to pay for that. Anyway, those are just they're kind of all over the place. Some of my thoughts on California, and I agree with everything Mike said. We need to have, representational, proportional government. We need to, have ranked choice voting. There's all kinds of things we can do that aren't necessarily Trump oriented. In terms of Trump, I mean, my life, I'm going to be fine because I'm pretty privileged, and I don't think it's going to affect me at all, but it's going to affect a lot of other people. And so I think people just, gotta just live on. And in terms of, not much, I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, except for the judiciary, most of the things he's going to do are going to end in 4 years. So I don't think people should freak out, and I'll join the conversation later. Thank you.
All right, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. We're now going to go to our final person. Jackie McGowan, are you there?
I'm here.
Jackie McGowan, thanks for coming out. Let me pull up your name. So Jackie ran as a Democratic Party candidate for governor in California, but she's had some political realignment. So, Jackie, how do you feel Californians should respond to the return of Trump? And if you could answer both as when you were a hardcore Democrat a year ago and where you are now, and maybe blend those responses. Jackie McGowan.
Yeah, sure. I'm born and raised Californian. I ran for governor of California against Newsom in the recall race in 2021. Not because I really wanted to be governor, but because I thought that Newsom was doing a really horrific job as a governor. And I did that as a Democrat, but when most people read my policies, they said, does Jackie know that she's actually running as a Republican, like for governor of California as a Democrat? So I was born and raised a Republican. So it really blew my family's mind when I ran as a Democrat. But I took an online test and I thought that I was a Democrat. But also, like, I was a cannabis lobbyist. And so cannabis people were always Democrats. So I really believed that I was a Democrat. I ran as a Democrat. I came in 7th place out of 46 people, and I got 215,000 votes. And after that, I really started to address like some of my concerns as a Democrat voter. One specific call I got from my mom. My mom called me up. My mom's a hardcore Republican who was actually going to vote for Kamala if I didn't talk her out of it. My mom called me up and she said, Jackie, what are you going to do about the border crisis if you become governor of California? And I was like, oh my God, Mom, like, stop watching Fox News. Like, there's no border crisis, right? Like, I really believed there was not a border crisis. Turns out there's a border crisis, and then it was, well, what are you going to do about Joe Biden's health? Right. And I'm like, Mom, Joe Biden's not sick, like it became all of these conversations that I had with my mom where I thought she was crazy. It turns out she was right. Right. So I started to wake up about how I've been lied to by mainstream media and by the Democrat Party. And you would have to run for office to understand like what I went through running for office. Like I got my social media accounts shut down. My friends that were posting for me got their social media accounts shut down. I would do an interview and it would like make the cutting room floor. Like there were so many things that I saw when people said to me, if you had said to me in 2020, oh, fake news, I thought you're a Republican and you just don't like what you're seeing, like with like the news, and so you're saying fake news. And then I learned that the news was fake. I learned the news was fake. I learned that the immigration issue was an actual issue. I learned that Joe Biden's health was a problem. I learned all these things that, like, I wholeheartedly believed that the Democrats were telling me the truth, that mainstream media was telling me the truth. And then I woke up and thought, wow, you guys have been lying to me all this time. I mean, that's really all I have to say is I woke up. I'm a Republican now.
Thank God.
You know what? Like I re-registered, and I'm such a Republican that I went and I door knocked for Trump in Georgia to make sure he won Georgia.
That's beautiful.
I walked 100 miles in a week and knocked on 1,000 doors, like, myself, right? Like, I had to go do that. It was, like, so important to me because I've been so lied to. And I wish that the rest of the Democrats, like the Democrat Party, would wake up. Because, like, I'm so mad at myself for not waking up sooner.
Yeah, okay, we'll stop there. So,
Yeah.
Veronica, I'll get to your question in a second. So you've heard from everybody. Now we're going to do the fun part where we have the panel discussion. So you've heard from everybody. We wanted to get a variety of comments in. Who would like to? We're going to go to Adam Kokesh. So let's try to keep it to like 1 to 2 minutes. Let's be nice. You don't have to not make pointed conversations. You can point things out, but let's keep it to 1 to 2 minutes so we can keep going around and have a nice conversation. Adam Kokesh.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm really honored to be included in this and all the great enthusiasm and ideas and out-of-the-box thinking that's going around. I'm honored to start the conversation with, I hope, a useful preliminary point here. First, to Jackie's point, guess what? The Republicans have been lying also. And I want to join the dog pile on Leo because it seems like it's what all the cool kids are doing, and clearly the most persecuted demographic in the state of California is Republicans. So that being said, there was a mention of Kool-Aid being drunk. There were personality attacks. There were, I mean, even the term crisis, Jackie, I not to nitpick on that one in particular, is not a term designed to describe reality, but create an emotional response. There's been a lot of Kool-Aid drunk on both sides this past election cycle. I do think, as someone who considers himself legitimately off the left-right spectrum entirely, I can step back and see, like, it's really accelerated on both sides. And I think in terms of this conversation in particular, we should hold ourselves to a higher intellectual standard in politics of not playing that game. And so the first thing is sober up from the freaking Kool-Aid, everybody. And, you know, to Leo, like, you don't have to promote Trump like a cult leader anymore. He won. And to the left side of this, like, yeah, you've been lied to a lot because there was so much media manipulation just around the election designed to make you afraid. If you give them the power to control your emotions because you haven't been taught emotional self-control, you're going to be manipulated for the rest of your life. And this is a great opportunity for everybody to see that and face up to that and say, like, yeah, we can look at this rationally. We can get over that hype. And the biggest thing I would point out is the facts to ground everybody on this is like, hello, Trump was already president for 4 years. He didn't do anything that great. He didn't do anything that bad. Like, he's a company man. He's not, you know, like, you don't have to defend his character. He's owned by the bankers. He promotes the establishment narrative in general.
No, he's not.
So, did he end the Federal Reserve last time he was president? Did he end the income tax? No. So that's it. I'd like to just say I encourage and invite everybody to have a higher level of intellectual integrity rather than relying on the tactics of emotional manipulation.
Hold on.
I actually think that you and I would be friends.
So Leo gets to respond. Leo, 2 minutes.
Adam, I don't support him and prop him up like a cult leader. This isn't a cult thing. This is a common sense thing.
He talked a lot about his character. It's not necessary.
Because that's all that the media can do is take shots at that.
I know.
So don't play that game. Rise above it and talk facts and policy.
No, but again, Californians, as you mentioned before, respond emotionally, and they're very emotional. So when you character, you have to address that issue.
I think we can elevate the conversation. I don't think we have to. That's pandering.
You made that point, Adam.
Let's hear what Leo has to say, please.
The problem is so many people get hyper fixated on single self-serving issues. They ignore an overlaying result that's affecting
100%.
the vast majority of us. Now, I understand that everybody has their different identifications and their different things that matter most to them, but this is so much bigger than individual self. This is about, and this is coming from a Republican, a collective benefit to all Americans. So I want to see that happen here in America. We're going to get that with Donald Trump. He's not coming to take your bathroom privileges away or not allow you to have an abortion. Okay, that's already been kicked back to the states. In California, you can have an abortion. It's by the state law, it's legal. And that's a personal choice. That
it might be illegal to come to California to get it. That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, look, this whole you make it sound like that there's this wave of pregnant women that are just dying to have an abortion. They're just like a sea of them migrating across the country. About? Exactly. It's such a small number. And
what are you
again, we're hyper fixated on, again, a very small percentage and a very not major issue.
The number of abortions,
the women who have sex and the men who have sex. I'm
gonna steal the stage right now. The number of abortions has actually increased since Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Right. So it didn't work.
And so you can't tell me that women are not getting abortions when the number went up.
Well, I'm not saying that they're not. I'm saying
I don't care.
There's not like this wave that it's like,
so then the argument is over access. I don't give a fuck. There's still more people getting abortions.
Marcus, I left out a really critical point. Adults who are capable of emotional self-control are able to contain their impulses to cut other people off and interrupt.
All right, stop.
I can't do that. I can't do that.
So we're gonna go. Thank you for all the opinions. We're gonna, and I love the passion. Keep the passion, Jackie. Keep the passion, Leo. Leo, another 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna go to other people.
No,
please let Leo speak uninterrupted. I'm gonna go to Dan, then I'll go to Hanink. Leo, 30 seconds, please, uninterrupted.
There's a lot of opportunity here to see things improve, like education and the quality of life. People don't want to spend tons of money on being able to buy groceries or buy gasoline, and they don't want to have their kids getting a garbage education. You want to have your kids being able to read at or above grade level. You want them to be able to have an understanding of civics, of history, be able to be functional members of society, not necessarily required to go to college to get a job, but people should be able to get jobs here in America that are fairly paid, but because they're able to keep more money in their pocket because they're not getting taxed to death. This is what we're going to see. Just look, and it's only 4 years. It's not the end of the world. He didn't start World War III. In fact, he's working to prevent World War III. So you're going to see a lot of upside here. And let's focus on what's best for the vast majority of folks and not our self-serving interests.
Okay. Now we're going to go to Dan, and then we're going to go to Professor Hanink. I want to welcome Professor Josef Chytry here. Professor, we'll get to you in just a second. I'll introduce you. We're having a rousing discussion right now. Dan, 2 minutes, then Professor Hanink. Dan.
All right, just real quickly, someone mentioned there's a border crisis. There's no border crisis. I guarantee you if like 5 times the amount of people came in, you wouldn't notice. If 1/5 the people came in, you wouldn't notice. America is so huge. Yeah, people go to the cities. There's no crisis. No one would even know the difference.
If you saw 5 times the amount of homeless, you would notice it. That's such a crazy
statement. 5 times. I'm not homeless. I'm talking about immigrants here.
Okay, my point is you would see them. It's not, you wouldn't notice it. That's
how many you don't notice because it fluctuates all the time, and you don't.
4 times the size of Nebraska have come
children.
4 years.
So what? Who cares? You know.
So what? Who cares?
Who cares?
I care.
Why do you care so much?
Well, then, if you care so much, you would support the people that pick your food and bring your food to the table.
You're too good for that job.
A small amount of people coming in to pick my food, and then after that, I don't support it.
This isn't about who does what job. You make it sound like you're too good for this. Americans are too up their own butt to do these kinds of jobs. I had a company that employed a lot of Americans to actually raise animals and process animals. We hired
4 times
colors,
the size
all
of
races.
Nebraska have come in 4 years. 4 fucking times the
Hey,
size
hey,
of
hey,
Nebraska.
hey.
The people that come here
We
illegally,
got to keep it PG-13, okay?
the people that come here
PG-13.
illegally aren't here to be your ag workers or your fast
Stop
food
paying them
employees.
to come into my country.
Look, the point is these are jobs that Americans can do. They might not be
Stop
sexy
paying
in
them
your-
to
in your
come
job.
into my country.
Hold on, I'm not talking. I don't want people coming here illegally. I'm saying these people that come and do these less than qualified American jobs that are beneath Americans. That's such a really rude statement to label those jobs as not good enough for me. I'm too good for that, or it's too good for an American job. It's such an asinine thought. You know, a lot of good, hardworking Americans do these kinds of jobs, and they deserve respect. And by respect, don't give them to other people that don't
I
deserve
fucking
them.
say that.
Jackie,
come on.
look, come on. We got to keep the cursing out.
There's children listening to this. A lot of children are listening to this right now.
Well, I try very hard to make sure that it's PG-13 so that if there are teenagers,
No, I agree.
they can watch. So we're going to go back to Leo. First, real quick, though, I want to introduce Professor Josef Chytry. Professor, thank you for being here. We've kind of gone into the academic panel, but the discussion on the political panel was so great that I'm going to try to keep it all together here as best I can. Hold on, we're having Professor Ryan Griffiths join us now. 1 second. Actually, Professor Hanink and Leo, I will get back to you in 1 second. Let me just do this real quick. So let me introduce the two professors who just came in, and then we'll go back to the comments. I appreciate it, but we're going a little bit long, and that's great. The conversation is really awesome. Let me introduce the two professors, though, and then we'll go right back to the comments. So Professor, sorry, I had everything. We have Professor Ryan Griffiths from Syracuse University. He works in political science. We also have Professor Josef Chytry from UC Berkeley, works in or got his degree in UC Berkeley in critical studies. They will be giving their opinion here in just a minute. Professors, what we've been asking everybody is to do 3 to 5 minutes of how you think California should respond to Trump, unedited, in your opinion, and then we'll go to the panel discussion. Before I do that, though, real quick, professors, I want to let some of these people wrap up their comments, and then we'll go to you guys. So I'm going to let them wrap up their comments for 2 to 5 minutes, and then Professor Chytry and Professor Griffiths, we will go to you guys right after that. So that's how we'll do it. Comments from Professor Hanink and Leo Zaki for 3 to 5 minutes. You guys were saying something important. I apologize. Thank you, Leo Zaki, and thank you, James Hanink, for being professional. Please make your comments. Sorry.
Yes, I agree with Adam on 2 points. Number one, I'm not on the left-right spectrum. American Solidarity Party thinks that that's a rabbit hole. And number two, that I agree with Adam, I'm for a more intelligent conversation. So knowing that you will all do some thinking after our round is done, I'd like you to ask yourselves, what would count as a consistent ethics of life?
Thanks, Professor.
Okay, Leo?
You know, having that ability to look back on this, I think, is very important. But, you know, when people make these just absolutely ignorant comments about the jobs for illegal immigrants that they're doing are beneath Americans, it's such a highfalutin attitude to have. And it really just shows that you're not traveled in this country and you don't understand who actually inhabits this place and who actually makes this place run. Illegal immigrants, yes, they're here, and yes, they're doing jobs, and yes, they're taking the less quote unquote attractive, desirable, or sexy jobs because the regulations and the extremely high cost to operate these businesses forces people to go and take cheaper labor that doesn't need insurance, that doesn't fall under those guidelines. And are they hiring these people illegally in a lot of cases? Yes. And it's taking job opportunities away from American citizens who are more entitled to those jobs, who are actually, 100% entitled to those jobs over folks that are here illegally. You come here with a work visa, that's a different story. You're born here as American, you're entitled to jobs here in America. There is a border crisis. We have a homeless crisis. We have people that are coming here because of the poor policies of the last 4 years. We have a down economy because of the poor policies of the last 4 years. Donald Trump is bringing a plan. I'm not here promoting him because he's some religious cult leader. He's someone who has an actual plan. He has a proven track record as a president. People always, again, hyperfixate on the emotional driven issues. And again, like I said, if you haven't been around this country, you haven't been to all the different parts of California, you haven't worked these jobs, it might be hard for you to grasp that there are different ways to live, different ways to enjoy life. I know living in a big city can really obscure that setting and that notion. But Donald Trump is here to do the right thing for all the Americans. So please give the man a chance. Don't look at him as a demon. And Jackie's 100% right when she talks about that the media is controlled and lying to us. And yes, the gentleman who ran for president as a libertarian is right that the Republicans have lied too. But there are bad Republicans, just like there are good Democrats. You have establishment rhino Republicans. That means Republican in name only. They are here spewing lies to the American people. You have this new grassroots America that falls under the category of MAGA, as in Make America Great Again, which really doesn't sound like a bad thing. In fact, it sounds like a great thing. So those are the good people. And I know there are good Democrats, but unfortunately, they're vastly outnumbered by the progressive Marxist left.
All right, we'll leave it there. We're going to go to now. I'm not saying don't have comments. Yeah, thank you, Dan. That's awesome. I'm not saying don't have comments.
Give me a chance. Give me a chance.
We just want to give everybody a chance. So what we're going to do is
Can you dig it?
We're going to go to the professors now who've been gracious enough to come. We're going to introduce Professor Ryan Griffiths, and then I'm going to introduce Professor Joseph Chytry. I will ask them to talk for 3 to 5 minutes on how they view California should respond to Trump, and then we will roll them into the conversation. So Professor Ryan Griffiths and then Professor Joseph Chytry, thank you both, professors, for coming out and adding a more academic air to this conversation. I really appreciate it personally. So Professor Ryan Griffiths is from Syracuse University. There he is. He's a professor of political science department. He also is a research co-director at the International and Interstate Conflict, and is a senior research associate for the Program for Advancement of Research on Conflict and Collaboration at the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. Professor Griffiths is one of the best known scholars of independence movements around the world who resides here in America. Professor Griffiths, how do you feel California or Californians should respond to basically the return of Donald Trump? A lot of them thought that he was going to be gone. He'd never come back. Now they're dealing with the shock that he's returned. We've heard from some conservatives. We've heard from some liberals. Obviously, California is mostly liberal, but we do have millions and millions of conservatives. How should we feel about this, Professor, in your opinion?
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Thanks for the invitation, Marcus. It's nice to be here. And I'm dialing in from the East Coast. I don't know how many people you have in my time zone. So it's later here, a bit dark and midst of a winter storm, but probably worse weather than what you guys are experiencing. So look, I'll do my best to answer some of that general question and maybe a couple of detours along the way. I'll keep it kind of brief. So, I mean, I think one of the lead questions I had is, how should California try to respond in light of the Trump victory? And there was a question a second ago about whether we should expect the California government to have a difficult time and with a Trump administration coming up. I mean, My quick answer to that is hard to say. Not necessarily. I mean, I think it's always important to remind everyone. And I just dialed in, but the man, I believe it was Leo, Mr. Zaki, talking a minute ago, was pointing out, California, although a blue state, there are millions of people who vote red and millions of people who are supporting Donald Trump and some of the policies that he's after, even if some sort of majority of Californians are opposed to a set of those policies. So, this is going to break down regionally across California. And some of the people on this panel, I'm sure, pointed this out already. So I'll just say two general things, and the first one is quite simple. I think the new administration has to be given a chance, and I would say this about any administration coming in. The majority of Americans, however narrow, have spoken, and I believe in democracy. I believe in trying to let the wisdom of the majority guide us. So you have to give that administration a chance and be willing to work with it. So that's my general feeling, which isn't anything shocking. The other thing I'll say, and this I think is why I'm invited here, because in the past I've spoken to Marcus about themes related to Cal Exit and about how the U.S. deals with how California deals with notions of secession, etc. This is a topic that I work on, and I have a book coming out next year about that. And as a scholar of secession, my general feeling is that I think polarization in the United States is a huge problem. I don't deny that at all. And I think it gets in the way of good, sensible policies. And I've spoken to people, right, left, secessionist, right, left, et cetera, red state America, blue state America, things like that. But I can say, as a scholar of secession, somebody in the book that comes out really dives into this. It's not really, it's kind of a non-starter. Secession in the United States is a very difficult thing to pull off without conflict. And for many reasons, which I'm happy to go into, it's just very difficult to do. And what that does, I think it redirects attention back to solutions for polarization in America have to be worked out. To use the analogy of divorce, I don't think a divorce can work here. What you need is good couples counseling. So I know that's hard to swallow sometimes if the person you elected didn't get into power. If Kamala Harris had won, then maybe there'd be a similar panel going on with the Texas nationalists. I don't know. But nevertheless, I think giving that administration a chance, trying to find common ground is the best way forward. Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to go to Professor Joseph Chytry. Give me 1 second. Thank you, Professor Griffiths. Thank you, Professor Chytry, for coming out. I really appreciate it. Professor Joseph Chytry, let me pull this up, is a senior adjunct professor at the CCA's undergraduate critical studies program. He's the managing editor of industrial and corporate change at the Institute for Business Innovation Haas School of Business, University of California, Berkeley, and was included in the 2007-08-09 editions of Who's Who in America. Since 2014, he has been annually teaching philosophy in the Stanford University Continuing Studies program. Professor, how should Californians respond to Trump returning? You're a Californian, you're an academic. No problems, everything's going to be fine, or, oh my God, the apocalypse, or somewhere in between. In your opinion, Professor, how should Californians feel about the second return of Trump? Oh, whoops, sorry. You have to
You're muted, Professor.
Okay, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Am I okay now?
Yes, Professor Chytry, sorry, we can hear you now. Professor, how should Californians respond to the return of Donald Trump?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Well, I certainly look forward to Professor Griffiths' book that he mentions for next year on secession. I'm much more limited in my knowledge of the subject. I've actually used over the years this book by Professor Treverton, Divided States. And I was inspired by his 2020 essay, where he actually saw further breakup of the American Republic. So that's the sort of context within which I'm doing my own thinking. Many years ago, I came up with this book, wherever it is, Mountain of Paradise, for which I'm going to bring out a new edition this coming year, and I hope to draw on the comments that were made today. I'm sure I'll be inspired by many original thoughts. But overall, I'm looking at the issue from the point of view of global history, the role of California, as everyone agrees, we're the fifth economic power. But more important, we've been around since certainly 1535, establishment of the name of California. And the present election, I think, has simply pushed forward this issue of what future California can have, either independently or in some quasi-autonomous form, or adjusting to the realities of being controlled by Donald Trump. It's worth mentioning that in terms of the Pacific states, and here I'm talking about Oregon, Washington, California, and Hawaii, the figures were 56-39% in favor of Harris, who's of course a Californian, in fact, who comes from my neighborhood. So it was a landslide, frankly, on the West Coast, and that's something to take into account. Obviously, there will be Republicans, as there are anywhere else. So my attitude is more one of looking towards where California can go in terms of being more and more separate from the kind of effects of Trump. One area in which one can do that is, of course, reverting to issues of states' rights. Of course, that was always used and exploited by the Old South, and still is, I guess. But then it has an advantage in terms of a federal system. Another way of going into the issue is to emphasize California's cultural uniqueness. Of course, we're all part of a globe, so we're never completely separate. And I have been working on that with editors here at Berkeley. We have a new journal called Dispatches, and we just came out with an issue which is just on California culture and its uniqueness. So combining these factors, I would say that the response of Californians to the Trump victory, which I think is a disaster, should be one, or one might want to consider it, should be one of increasing detachment. And detachment means increasing attention to California as, if not legally or politically, an independent force, a powerhouse in its own right, and slowly cultivating more and more of the implications of what that might imply. Incidentally, Treverton's book sounds a little more positive, if that's the right word, than what seems to be Professor Griffiths' comments, so far as I can tell from his brief comments. Namely, Professor Treverton has said secession is not all that unique. If certain conditions are in play, and he goes into that in some detail, it can be worked out. And ultimately, the so-called richer component, and I assume that's California versus the US, comes out the better. So those are some thoughts that I would just throw on the table.
Okay. Let's go back to the conversation now. I want to bring everybody in. Response from the other people in the panel to what the professor said, from Leo, Veronica, Leo Zaki, the Republican candidate, James Hanink, the Solidarity candidate, Mike Feinstein, the Green Party candidate, or Veronica Fembres, the Green Party candidate. Opinions on what you heard from the two different professors before I go back to them. Just Professor Hanink.
I'd be curious to what extent Professor Griffiths is in fact in favor of democracy. As a historical matter, Hitler was elected by a Democratic majority. And it seems to me that democracy for the sake of democracy is not sufficient. I mean, we want democracy insofar as it leads us to human flourishing, I would think. And from Plato on, there have been questions raised about whether we can simply put all our eggs in the basket of democracy.
I guess, Professor Griffiths, that's a question to you. Response?
Sure. I mean, I'll take a quick stab and then try to maybe answer a question that is slightly different, which is, I mean, the question is, am I in favor of democracy? And it refers to the election of Adolf Hitler, and which gradually rolls into the disastrous consequences that we know about. I mean, I would say that that's framed as the current election is equal in some sense to that election.
No, it's just a test case.
Let's let him finish, Professor Hanink. Please let Professor Griffiths finish his response.
So, I mean, the question has valence. It's salient if we think there's some sort of equality between them. Perhaps there is. It's not something that I necessarily see. Certainly, the guardrails for democracy here in the United States are stronger than Germany. In and toward the end of the Weimar period. Having said all that, I want to be clear that one of the things I do in my work or in the book that I've referenced is not to try to dispel notions of polarization. It's not to try to equate current leaders to leaders of the past, anything like that. It's a different project. My cut into that entire question is to basically take my knowledge of how secession works elsewhere and say the case in America, or the setting in America, does not match the settings where it was rather successful. And that if it's going to work, it's going to be very violent and a very turbulent period. And that future to me looks a lot worse than trying to work through the system right now to try to find, a less polarized, more harmonious America.
Okay. Let's go back. Well, let me ask you this. Now let's focus on this. Any comments on how bad California should think that it's going to be? I'm going to go to you, Veronica, because
how bad? What was your question, Marcus? How bad? What?
How bad will California suffer under Trump? I know you have a very strong opinion. I share a lot of it. But I know we also had some other people say, well, it's not going to be that bad. So, Veronica, you've heard everybody here. How do you respond to the response? Do you still think it could be bad?
I think that I would love to give anybody a chance. Without everybody deserves a clean slate. But we're talking about a convicted felon. Nobody else that has a felony can run for president, but he did. He's the one that wanted us to rake up the forest because we have forest fires because of the heat and the climate. He wanted to cut off our money. He didn't want to give us money because we're a democratic state. That Gavin Newsom wasn't deserving because he didn't support Trump. And while Gavin Newsom isn't the know all and be all, I mean, these policies where people that he has on his panel are frankly nuts. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for one, space lasers shooting down, and I mean all of this stuff. And remember, all of you on this panel, other than me and Mike and Marcus, are white men. And wait, Leo, don't come for me yet. It's my turn. Are white men. You all have white privilege, whether you recognize it or not. And Trump wants to take us back to where I can tap dance. Show enough, Mr. Master, sir. That's what I feel and what I see and what I hear in his politics. And so I am outraged when you talk about women have to come over to California. It's not a tourism thing to get an abortion. They come to California to get an abortion because they can't get it in their own state. And if you think when they talk about abortion, they call anything an abortion. A D&C is for a woman's uteral health. It's not for an abortion. But they're taking away reproductive rights of women. They're making women second class, third class, fourth class citizens. It makes no sense. And how all these men do all this stuff to these women and they can sit on panels and judge and do things is just unfathomable to me. I can't understand how they can even do it. But here we have, in California, we have issues. There's no reason that any child should go hungry when we have all this prosperity. No child should go hungry. There's no reason that the people that pick our food and bring food to table should have to endure cancer from the chemicals that they put on the food that they pick up to put on our tables.
Well, who's going to do away with that?
Excuse me?
Who's going to do away with getting rid of those chemicals that cause this cancer?
Certainly not. You know what? The guy with the worm in his brain is not going to do it. Robert Kennedy is not going to do it. The worm is still eating him up, as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Thank you, Veronica. We're going to come back to you. Thank you, Leo. We're going to go to Mike, and then I'll come back to Leo. We'll just Leo. Just want to get everybody involved. Mike, please.
Yeah, just two practical governing concerns I think we should have. One, as a strong donor state, we want to make sure there is not a vindictive approach from the federal government to deny us funding for things that we need. We give a lot to the rest of the country. That's fine. We're part of a whole federal system. I don't mind being a donor state per se, but I don't want to see a vindictive policy back to deny us funding that we need. The second thing is that we have a waiver in the Clean Air Act so that we can pursue stronger environmental standards that the rest of the country learns from. The catalytic converter, of course, is the famous example from many years ago that became a national standard because we tried it here first. And there's a concern that Trump will threaten that. So I think those are some very practical things about how we govern ourselves that could be under threat from this administration and I hope don't happen.
Okay. Professor Chytry, Professor Griffiths, I want to tie back into you. Actually, I'm sorry. Leo, we're going to go to you for 2 minutes, and then I'll go to the professors again. Leo, you were called out for 2 minutes. Leo, please respond, and then we're going to go to Professor Griffiths and Professor Chytry, and the two professors, I'll ask you how you view what you're seeing right now on the screen. Leo Zaki for 2 minutes, and then we're going to go to the professors.
Right. So there was a lot of false statements there from Veronica when it comes to what, yes, they were false. So when you talk about raking the forest, well, we should be doing forest management to prevent wildfires. That's why our state is currently uninsurable. When Donald Trump cut federal funding to the state of California because Gavin Newsom was in opposition to doing common sense things to help make things more affordable, he cut the funding, and rightfully so. And if Gavin Newsom does do something like that again, I can guarantee you Donald Trump will cut the federal funding to the state, and it will cause the state that is being so horribly mismanaged and so over budget to go into bankruptcy. And I can promise you, you will see Republican victories across the state when that does happen. Should Gavin Newsom not be willing to play ball and do the right thing here in the state. You mentioned a whole lot of things talking about white privilege. Again, you take this victim mentality notion.
Stop! I'm not a victim. I'm never a victim.
Let's let Leo finish, and then
when you make those statements about victimhood like that, saying that people have privilege and second-class citizens for women about this abortion stuff. First off, the abortion thing has been decided. It's been kicked to the states. California allows abortion. And on top of that, you want to talk about second-class citizens? How about when because I don't take a COVID vaccine, I'm not allowed to go to a restaurant. I'm not allowed to go to the gym. I have a membership.
We're not doing COVID. Sorry.
No. It's not about COVID. It's not about that. It's about my point is about a second-class citizen. Oh, but what happened to my white male privilege? Where did that go? So I think that's a completely erroneous and victim mentality thing to mention. It's nonsense. It does not exist. The only thing that exists is false notions of victimhood that people put on themselves because they are too weak and won't take responsibility for themselves.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Everybody gets a chance. We're going to go to the two professors. Professor Griffiths, Professor Chytry, obviously you've seen a little microcosm of California. California is exceptionally liberal, exceptionally progressive. However, Trump had his best showing ever in California and won so many votes that it has actually shocked Californians. Now, it's still a solid 2/3 for Kamala versus Trump. This is a hardcore liberal state, but Trump did do way better than anyone here thought. So you're hearing people saying, well, it's overblown. you're hearing Californians who are minorities. I'm a minority. I have my own opinion, saying, no, it's not overblown. We're scared. Professor Chytry and then Professor Griffiths, how do you feel looking at the range of opinions here in California? We're going to go to Chytry and then we'll go to Griffiths. Tell us how reasonable these variety of perspectives are and where you stand on them. Please, Professor Chytry, then Professor Griffiths.
Well, listening to the back and forth, it does seem to me that there's a big disparity. The conditions of minorities here are clearly threatened by a Trump administration. There's no ambiguity about that. The choice of officers, as Ms. Fimbers, I hope I pronounced that correctly,
You did.
brought up, yeah, thank you, is actually very laughable. And so it's very difficult to even get started with what Mr. Zaki, I guess he's running for governor or whatever, brings up. On top of that, I think the point you've made, Mr. Ruiz-Evans, is excellent. Namely, California has developed its own culture over a very long time, and it's continuing to grow. And this culture is extremely different from a great deal of what exists in the rest of the United States, but above all, from what I understand to be the Republican positions as announced, as espoused by Trump and his followers. So it does seem to me that there's a very good reason for concern. And my own response is, when we bring up the whole issue of secession, to just make the point that we're not talking about a secession now, but we are talking about taking seriously the uniqueness of California and finding policies that go in that direction. One of my suggestions, if I may throw it out very quickly, is I think we do need a California Constitutional Convention. A, because our Constitution is overloaded, it needs to be tightened. And B, because we now live in a world very different from 1879, and we need to recognize the kind of culture, society, politics, and even spirituality that we have in California. So it's a very different direction that I see, and obviously it's directed very much against the Trump administration. Trump had his opportunity between 2016 and 2020, and in my view, was a total failure and a danger both to the world and to the United States and to California. So there's no reason to say, well, let's start from scratch. In many ways, I admire Professor Griffiths' tolerance, but I'm not of the same position. I think he's had his opportunity, and everything he's shown in this election confirms that it's going to be worse than it was before, which was bad enough.
All right, let's go to Professor Griffith. Professor Griffiths, thank you for coming. How would you summarize, Professor Griffiths, the range of opinions? Before you comment, I just want to say to this person, well, real quick, sorry. I understand that it's frustrating, and I understand that as a Californian, we wanted it to be all one way. Like I was explaining, 2/3 of California does feel one way, but we also have to acknowledge that 40% of California doesn't. And we have to have a conversation for the whole state, and we cannot move forward as progressives if our way to deal with things is to say, well, I don't want to hear what any of the conservatives have to say, and I'm just going to make up my own opinion about what they think without talking to them or checking in. That's madness. So I'm a progressive, but I'm very cool with conservatives. Very cool. And I respect their opinion. I don't always agree. And that's what this is. I understand people are frustrated, but I also think, I don't know if we can make this a less frustrating time. America has a winner-take-all style election system. No one else on the planet basically does that. It's just us. Most people have multi-party systems. We have one where half loses and has to deal with it. Most of the modern world doesn't do that. Professor Griffiths, I apologize for the aside. Professor Griffiths, how would you say, what's your summary of the range of opinions you're seeing here with Californians? Obviously, some very strong opinions on both sides. We respect both sides' opinions, and thank you everybody for coming out. But Professor, in your opinion, what are you seeing? How would you summarize it? Californians should be worried or not?
Well, let me, so just to go back to try to summarize some of the opinions, I'm actually deeply sympathetic to the opinions I heard. So the points that Veronica brought up, I respect that. I'm deeply sympathetic to the issues, and the texture of all of this, I get it. I also sympathize with some of the comments that Leo made in response. So I get all that. And I also, and to the professor's Chytry's comments about California being so different, a different culture and all that. I both agree, but with a caveat, right? I mean, I'll say this. I don't live there now, but I lived there for 10 years. It's my favorite state in America. I think it's a wonderful state. I just love it. I think it's kind of like the best representation of America. Having said that, it's deeply divided, as you can see. And this is probably a slightly self-selected audience that we have here anyway. I don't know that it is, even though it is different in feel from the rest of America in various ways, it's not, it's not like it's a different nation. And there's so many Californians who come from somewhere else who feel deeply connected to the rest of the country. So I'm always cautious about just how different these things can be. But to Professor Chytry's point, and also to the comments made by Mr. Feinstein, I think, look, if 60% of the state of the electorate voted for Harris, I think that's about right, Marcus?
That seems about right. Yeah,
about right.
Roughly 60-40.
I think they should.
It's a little less. They should a little less
about that. Okay, then they should do the things. If going for some sort of constitutional convention, or as Mike pointed out, right? If they feel that it's a donor state, which meaning that it gives more to the federal coffers than it gets back in terms of state programs, et cetera, and then it's getting penalized for that, then it should fight for its position in the union. And if the government doesn't honor that will be very costly for the government. It can gradually solidify a California difference or the sense of a different nation if it doesn't listen to those gripes. Those are real concerns. And if it's a net donor and it's not being respected and getting back what it wants, that will gradually become a problem for the country. So I think it should do things. It should fight for what it wants, but it should do that within the confines of the Constitution, following the legal system. And to me, that is completely right for it to do, given what the electorate wants in California to see happen.
All right, we're going to go to Mike, and then I'm going to have a quick show for everybody, and we'll have more questions. Mike Feinstein, your comments on all this, please.
Yeah, two brief points. First, as a Green, I want to clarify that our position on bodily autonomy and the pro-choice and abortion question is that bodily autonomy is a civil right. And under our federal system, civil rights should be a floor, and then states want to go further than that, great. Not to have a lack of civil rights be an option on a state-to-state basis. And therefore, how the Trump administration is portraying this, that we've kicked it back to the states, is essentially, yes, you can be stripped of your rights in different states depending upon where you live. We don't think that is an approach that is either just or consistent with our federal system. On the Constitutional Convention, I was involved in the 2009-2010 California Constitutional Convention effort, involved with the people in the Bay Area Council, et cetera. And where we went awry at the time was that the funding to qualify the ballot measure, the people who wanted to fund it did not want to have the kind of inclusive civic assembly sort of model that would have been drawn from a range of Californians, but they wanted political appointees. And that wouldn't work. And I am in favor of bringing a constitutional convention back, but having it be along that kind of jury selection enhanced model where the great diversity in our state is all there at the table, and then complement that with a media broadcast with our modern technology to make the public process for such a constitutional convention widely broadcast to people around the state and participatory, so it really grabbed the attention and got the input of enough people to make it valid. Thanks.
Okay. Now I'd like to take the opportunity to show you all some facts, and then I'd like to ask your opinion about it. So I've been listening intently to what everybody's saying. Give me just a minute here to point a few things out. These are hard facts, and then I'll come back around. So the first thing I want to talk about is that Trump now has a level of influence that's beyond what anybody's ever had. So the Republicans now have a trifecta control of government, which means they own the White House, the Senate, and the House. But what's different this time is that they have literally a 4 level of control. The Supreme Court is now the most conservative it's been since the late 1970s. And people now consider that nobody's ever achieved the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. That basically hasn't been done in a really, really, really long time. And that's new and scary and gives them a lot of power they didn't have before. Here's another fact. Donald Trump said at the Republican National Convention that he would vow the largest deportation operation ever. I am Mexican. The operation that Donald Trump was referring to proudly at the Republican National Convention was called Operation Wetback. I'm not making that up. That's a fact. He referred to the Eisenhower plan and said, it was awesome and I want to do it even bigger. It was called Operation Wetback. He could not condemn the term. He did not bring it up, but he referenced it and said it was great. Also, people who were citizens were deported, even though they were Mexican, because they didn't care. And they also deported Russians. So that's a little bit interesting. The other thing that grabs my attention as a Latino person was J.D. Vance, his vice president, actually won his race because he had a TV commercial where he said, do you hate Mexicans? I'm not making this up. You can look it up. Yes, he did do that. Yes, there was a video, and Donald Trump did not talk to him until after he won this race where he ran this commercial. He was going to lose, then he had this commercial. So I see Operation Wetback at the RNC, and then I see this guy's announced to be the vice president. That doesn't exactly imbue me with confidence as a Latin person. Finally, there was the joke about how all of Puerto Rico is a garbage island. And when J.D. Vance was asked, he said, we just need to not be so offended. Well, of course you would say it. You ran a TV commercial saying, do you hate Mexicans? Of course you're on the side of not being offended. I got to tell you, though, as a Mexican and every Latin person in California, deeply offended at even seeing this picture. Deeply. I also point out that Latin people are the largest ethnic group in California. In fact, there's more Latinos than white people. So that's interesting, too. Finally, let's get to this. Also, we have the Congressional Hispanic Caucus in 2020 pointed out that Stephen Miller is a white nationalist. Stephen Miller has been reappointed to the Trump administration. So as a Latin person, I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at that. Doesn't look good. Fine, let's go to here. Pat Bondi says, hey, if you want to participate in a protest where you're supporting the Palestinians, maybe we need to deport you or have the FBI investigate you. So if you go to a protest and you say anything positive about the Palestinians, FBI investigation or deportation. That's extreme. I know a lot of people who do go to Palestinian protests. That terrifies them because they thought they had constitutional protections, and now the person who's going to run the law is saying, we'll remove those from you. Let's go to Linda McMahon as the education secretary. She's going to be in charge of education, and she said loudly at an anti-trans right-wing nonprofit that she opposes radical gender ideology. So the person coming in for education is going to be anti-trans. That's basically what she said. I'm not making this up. These are not left-wing news. This is middle of the road. Finally, we have Donald Trump literally said, I will be a dictator on day one. Now, I know that the media has lied about Trump. Trump never said there was good people on both sides at the Charlottesville rally. That was a lie. The media pushed that. I know that 100%. But this is true. He literally said that. He also said, actually, let's get to that certain elected officials are the enemy within. The enemy within. That language has never been used before, and it's kind of scary. And then when we talk about how well we're going to resist Trump, I was hoping Dan Kapelovitz could be here. Turns out we lost a lot of the times. We were not able to protect our sanctuary city committees. Let me show you a little bit on that. In fact, it turns out California massively failed to protect immigrants during this time. I'm hoping everybody can see that on the screen. Let me, oh, no, that's the Ninth Circuit Court. There you go. I know that's a little bit small screen, but just briefly, the Ninth Circuit Court ruled that the Trump administration can cut federal funding to places that have undocumented immigrants. The Supreme Court also ruled that Trump can have the ability to detain immigrants awaiting deportation anytime and leave them in those prisons for years. The Supreme Court also ruled that you can cut medical benefits to undocumented. They also ruled that it is okay to racially profile people if they look Latino. This was the Supreme Court during Obama before it became even more conservative. Yes, they said you could racially profile Latin people. Finally, they also said, no, California, you cannot make sure that companies and businesses don't report to the federal government undocumented. If they're going to go against what you said, there's nothing you can do to make California businesses comply with you. Additionally, you cannot make sure that your law enforcement agencies don't comply with the federal government. 2/3 of California law enforcement agencies went against what 2/3 of the California public wanted and did their own thing. Finally, these people are dead. Agustina Ariola, Vincent Maradiaga, Sergio Lopez, Asmar Gadba, Igor Zayazin, Jose Hernandez, and Jose Bucio. There's one guy, he's dead. And then finally, there's other things like they allowed the Muslim deportation ban. So when I'm looking at these things, and then I look at this, proposed amendments to the U.S. Constitution seldom go anywhere. That's by the Pew Research Center, talking to experts. Basically, this idea that you're going to amend the Constitution, give up on it. They're not alone. Here's this group, the New York Times. They also looked at this and said the idea of a constitutional amendment is laughable. So my question is, if you're a Californian and you see he has total control more than anybody, and hey, Operation Wetback, and I hate Mexicans, and it's cool to make fun of Puerto Rico, and let's hire a white nationalist. I'm sorry, these are all facts. These are all facts. I didn't pick this from left-wing news. You can look it up. I challenge anybody.
Okay, great. Marcus, I while you were talking about all this stuff, I went and found that clip of the JD Vance commercial that you're talking about.
Mhm.
That wasn't him making, do you hate Mexicans? Get on board with me. That was being phrased in a way that people are questioning people who have conservative views and want to have a strong border. That's how that was phrased. I have it pulled up here if you'd like me to play it. So
you're absolutely right. I'll just agree with you. You're absolutely right. Here's why
So look, I think there's a lot of things that are getting thrown out here
that are all facts, and the fact is that
you're right. You're right.
That would be super offensive to Latin people. No politician in California could ever run a commercial and say, do you hate Mexicans? I'm just asking, and get anywhere. So that
wasn't a question directed to the people as, do you hate Mexicans? Are you racist? Do you hate Mexicans? Get on the Trump train and JD Vance.
The commercial that ran would never fly here, and nobody would ever run here.
But again, a lot of the things that you're focusing on here, they're definitely
facts.
Well, no, a lot of them are a lot of clickbait sort of titles, and I think there's a lot more under the surface to a lot of the things that were mentioned.
So just to be clear, he didn't say he wanted to do Operation Wetback.
That's the name. So that's the name of it. That's what it was called. It's like trying to go back in history and change the name of I don't know, a book that, some sort of horrible book. Like, let's change Hitler's Mein Kampf to something more palatable. You can't change it. That's just the name of it. So yes, did Dwight Eisenhower deport a lot of illegal immigrants? Absolutely. Were the vast majority of them at that time, back in the 50s, before you had a lot of massive, intercontinental air travel? Yeah, they were most probably from Mexico. Did Barack Obama deport a lot of illegal immigrants? Absolutely, he did. He deported over 3 million illegal immigrants. So this isn't a unilaterally Republican thing. And now that we know for a fact that we've had in just the last 4 years, we've had over 11 million illegal immigrants come into this country, and they're not just from Mexico. Now, are they entering via Mexico? The vast majority of them are. Are they all from there? No. Are they all Hispanic? No. We know that there are people from China that are coming here, and a lot of them are Chinese agents. You have people coming from the Congo, from Europe, from the Middle East, from Southeast Asia. It's the whole point is that you have people coming into the country illegally. What they're doing by crossing the border without going through a proper port of entry, without proper paperwork, without a visa, is a crime. So they have broken the law. You're not going to put 11 plus million people in jail that are breaking and what a lot of people would call a nonviolent offense in jail, right? You wouldn't want to do that. It doesn't make sense. You should send them back to the countries that they came from. And we should also not be responsible for paying for that, because that's wrong. We also know for a fact that a lot of countries like Venezuela, for example, have emptied their prisons and said, go to America or get out of this country, essentially go to America, because if you come back, we're just going to kill you or keep you in jail. So we know that we have people that are being killed by illegal immigrants. We have people being raped and drugs are being trafficked here via illegal immigrants, whether they're doing it because they're under threat of their life because of the cartels or because it's something they do for profit. That's a whole sub case subject. The whole point is that they're here illegally. I know we talked about a lot of things, so please hit me with another one.
So I just want to respond to that. Yes, you're right. I agree with. I see you, Professor Hanink, and we will go to you in just a second, Professor Hanink. I want to respond to Leo. Yes, Leo, that's right. However, the point of this town hall was how should Californians respond to the age of Trump? And for a fact,
stop freaking out about it. It's going to be fine. Look, and here's the best
if
part.
I may, I let you speak for 4 minutes. I didn't say it. If I may, please. Nobody would ever reference Operation Wetback, not know what they're talking about in California as a Republican or Democrat and get anywhere. They'd be destroyed the moment they brought that up. That's a California perspective. Secondly, nobody could ever run a TV commercial that looked like J.D. Vance's TV commercial, regardless of what he meant, and get anywhere here in California. So those are things that are wildly out of view and would never happen in California. And if you dared to do those things here, you would be destroyed. I'm not disagreeing with you as an interpretation of the facts. What I'm saying is that those things those guys did are anathema to California, and they would have been wiped out by everybody if they ever tried to doing that here. That's clearly against California. So why should Californians feel comfortable when they did that? Secondly, the other stuff I said, these are all facts. He said these things. I gave you the fact that he said good people on both sides was not true. Absolutely. But he did say these other things. The enemy within, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. Literally nobody said that before running for the president. We're supposed to just ignore that?
We have a deep state, Marcus. There are outside entities that are controlling people in power. You have entities like the World Economic Forum that push for one world governance.
Fair enough. All right, let's go to Professor Hanink. I'm going to mute the other mics so that we can hear more clearly. No offense. Professor Hanink?
Let's wait till they're muted.
We're good. We got them muted. We're good. You're clear, Professor Hanink.
Thanks. Marcus, I know that you want to have a wide range of opinion, and there are people who think that Trump is totally unacceptable, ought never to be president, and like me, think that he ought to be in jail. On the other hand, there are people who think that Kamala Harris, among other things, the very lady who spent $1.5 billion in the last 15 weeks of her campaign, are totally unacceptable for some of the reasons why they think she's totally unacceptable. As a Californian, she did nothing effective to stop our state having the highest child and family poverty rate in the country. She actually promoted legal attacks on pregnancy health centers. And along with the Democratic Party, she favors assisted suicide. And also, neither of our luminaries from California, Newsom or Harris, have even so much as questioned whether or not the University of California should tend and develop and modernize our nuclear weapons arsenal. And in fact, like so many Democrats in California, she and Newsom have done what they can to get the support of venture capitalists rather than challenging them. Now, is there an alternative? Pope Francis, and I am proudly Roman Catholic, Pope Francis said that, well, it's tough. You have to choose the lesser of two evils. Choose Trump and you know what you get. Choose Harris and you know what you get. I'd like to say, and I've said it to many people, and I said it in a lead editorial in the Los Angeles Archdiocesan News Magazine, that there is, in fact, an alternative that ought to be considered, the American Solidarity Party. I voted for Peter Sonsky and Lauren Onak. Now, it's hard to get very much traction when the politicians on the left and on the right, and perish both sides, it's hard to get much traction with an independent party. If to be recognized, you need 70,000 registered members, which is what we would need to be a registered approved party. We were fortunate enough to get to be a registered approved write-in candidate slate. So there is this truly independent, neither right nor left, neither conservative nor liberal, rather progressive in the best sense, progressive towards the common good, which doesn't always get guaranteed by democracy, although democracy is probably the best thing we have going for us. Now, I want to backtrack to Veronica's discussion of abortion, and I guess Michael Feinstein's discussion as well.
Just
let it not be said that this is simply a matter of one person's bodily autonomy. We all know that abortion is the deliberate destruction of a human being. This is, Mark, a fact. It cannot be denied. And what we have to do is to factor that in big time.
Okay. We're going to go to Mike Feinstein now. There was, let me put this up. So I made a comment about fine people on both sides being negated by the media. Let me unmute everybody here. Mike had this article to show. Let me also pull up the other information.
Actually, I threw in a follow-up that had a specific transcript. The next one, I tried to cut and paste from that first one, but the second one, the link that I put in the has the word-by-word transcript. And I know that Trump has argued that the context should not be interpreted in the way that many did, but it's in the transcript. So, you know, look, this is not the major point of everything, but I do think that if people are there transcribing it, you can, like many times when people are quoted, you can argue about whether the context should be interpreted one way or the other. And, you know, for many people, they would say, well, don't take Trump literally for what he's saying for thousands of things he said. So we're familiar with that as well. But I just, you know, my understanding is that that from that PolitiFact and many other places, the Congressional Record earlier text that it was said. It's not my main point to make in all this, but
so the media never chopped the video up to make it look like he said things that were slightly different than what he said. That didn't happen at all.
Look,
so that's what I'm being told, is that the media absolutely did chop it, and they're not admitting that.
Look, I think we can. I don't think this is the main thing to have this conversation rise and fall on. But you know, my understanding from the transcript is that sentence was said, and the transcript there puts it in a linear manner, so we can judge what he meant by it or not. But I do have to say, as a Jew, to watch all those people marching with those torches was pretty unsettling to me.
Yeah, the Unite the Right rally, absolutely.
They wanted to tear down history, American history. Like Robert E. Lee is part of history. American history. You can't erase it. It happened, and it's better to have statutes to remember these things. So you look back
Right,
on time.
but so was California having a war. Excuse me, the United States having a war against Mexico and taking large parts of territory that was part of Mexico, and having families that lived for generations on both sides of the border who continued to stay connected. And we also had a Bracero program that invited people to come in and work in this country and then kick them out later. So there's a lot of history.
Well, there was a lot of
to go
changing
into
hands of
on
those
all of these
countries and
issues.
territories back then too. I mean, it was New Spain, it was Mexico. You had France owning parts of it for a while. I mean, it changed
Right,
hands.
but
It was
the
a wild. It
point
was
about
new
who
land at
owns
that
and
point.
what our nation states is an interesting one, but also is interesting about families living for generations on both sides of what today is a border, and at least taking that into account when we look at our policies. And we don't talk about illegal corporations. We try and talk about illegal people and illegal immigrants, but we have rampant corporate crime in this country, and we don't have people on the media talking about illegal corporations and shutting them down the way we talk about people who immigrate here and who pay taxes and don't undermine the economy, the way people use that to scapegoat them because we have an unfair economy that has great income inequality, which is why the Democrats lost, because they didn't deal with income inequality, because they shut down Bernie Sanders and put up corporate people like Hillary Clinton and the rest of them. So there's a lot of interesting angles to this. And I think the immigration debate in this country that is simplistic, that treats immigrants as an enemy and an outsider, ignores a great deal about the history of this continent and U.S. intervention in all kinds of countries, destabilizing governments and countries and undermining the quality of life and stealing resources and flowing them to the north, to the first world. You know, it just has to be a broader debate.
Sounds like we should help
do
people
that.
promote their own countries instead of having them all imported to the United States. We should help them there establish better, stable economies.
don't.
And better, stable
But we
countries.
don't.
You're right, because we
don't
have,
at all.
we have a globalist
Okay,
infiltration
guys,
of our government,
sorry,
and Trump
sorry.
is not a part
Yeah,
of that.
we're getting off topic. We're getting off topic. You're right. That's a separate debate. We could do that. I want to talk about how Californians should feel, and I want to go back to the two professors. So, professors, given that these are kind of the comments being made, however you would feel about them, and stuff coming down, and, you know, day one dictator, and don't worry, and that experts are saying, give up on changing the Constitution. Amendments are never going to happen. And that I pointed out that, in fact, California was not able to protect many of its people. It was not able to protect undocumented people from being rounded up, interned for multiple years, dead. It was not able to prevent transgender people from being banned in the military. It was not able to prevent Muslims from being banned coming into the country. Should we, how realistic? Because I'm hearing like, hey, use the federal system and fight back. Okay, well, California lost last time. People died. Okay, well, let's fix the Constitution. Experts are saying you can't do that. So where do we go? How do we protect our rights? And why should people have faith in the federal system if it looks like you can't change the federal system? And now Trump has more control than any administration going back maybe a century, and the Supreme Court aligned with him. Given all that, why should Californians feel confident that we could use the system to fight back? Let's go to Professor Griffiths, and then we'll go to Professor Chytry.
All right. So thank you, Marcus. So, I mean, I'll go back to the opening question and the stuff that you were showing. I mean, I think the bottom line is people should be concerned. Absolutely. And I would say this, if we just played Mad Libs here and took Trump out of the hyphenated line, and any president that comes in with a trifecta, right? One party's got both upper and lower house, and then has the executive. That is usually something that, we should take notice of this, because they have a lot more power to put things through. Now, it depends, of course, on their margins. The margins aren't going to be so great, but nevertheless, that is something to be concerned about. And if they have a Supreme Court that seems to be running in the same direction, sympathetic, then you have a bit more than a trifecta. So, and and to the points that you brought up and things that are said, I mean, yeah, I take your point, and those are all things to be, look, I mean, even if we take a charitable interpretation of how those things were said and maybe they're dressed up, I think it's safe to say that, Trump makes comments that, I'm not sure if somebody leading the country should be making. So I agree with all that. I'll make 2 points here. One is on the amendment issue. It is difficult, right? It's hard. I mean, the founding fathers, they made it difficult. That's a high bar to make an amendment. Now, sort of counterintuitive, well, it's not counterintuitive, but in a way, that's not a bad thing, Marcus, to what you're worried about, because that also puts a brake on what they're able to do, given that they have the trifecta, right? It's going to be hard. Let's say they wanted to put through a constitutional amendment, just to be really weird and crazy here for a second, that outlawed a certain demographic or something, all right? It took rights constitutionally away. It'd be very difficult for them to do that because of the same high bar for passing an amendment that you're talking about. So that's, I mean, I don't know if that's silver lining, but that is something to consider. It's hard to make these amendment changes in America. So how much, to your final, to the core question you're asking, how much should people be worried who did not vote for Trump and are worried about these things they're saying? I don't have a great answer for that. And as far as I can tell, I don't know anybody that does, because we don't know what this administration is going to be able to put through, how effective they're going to be, and whether or not a lot of the stuff that is said is just cheap talk, stuff that's said on the cuff. So I don't know. I do worry about some things that have, about what could happen. But I don't have a good answer as to how much people should be worried, except that I totally understand why people can be, and certainly for the reasons that you specify.
Professor Chytry, thank you, Professor Griffiths. I really appreciate that. I don't know the answer either, but for me, I'm seeing a lot of concerning things. Maybe he doesn't mean it. Okay, maybe. But now we're gambling that he doesn't, right? Now we're going, well, I'm going to gamble that he doesn't mean these things. And he said a bunch of them, and it's kind of scary that he said that and he didn't walk it back. And then these other things against minorities and the fact that California lost. I mean, there's dead people, and there's interned people, and there's transgender, and there's gay people, and there's Muslims and Latin people who really got a roughshod last time. It was not easy or good. And we're going, well, it'll be, maybe it'll be okay next time. It was bad last time. And now we're going into a system where the Supreme Court is more conservative than it was in 2016. The Supreme Court before it was more conservative, said it's okay to racially profile Latin people. Now they're more conservative than that. We've also seen this conservative Supreme Court overturn precedents that are 70 and 60 years old. So they're willing to do that. Professor Chytry, given statements, given background, given the inability to change the Constitution or file an amendment, how scared should Californians be? Or should they say, it's an election, people say things to win, calm down? Which one seems more appropriate?
I would say neither. I mean, I'm not scared. In fact, I'm encouraged by the extreme situation that a Trump administration brings into play. As I've said before, the issue of California uniqueness has been developing over time, and it may now have reached kind of a watershed. So it's a positive moment for me. There's nothing like a good battle to establish one's independence, as we know in terms of certain colonists on the East Coast in the 1770s. So my position is this: one, get lawyers for California that really squeeze out every possibility of states' rights. Of course, ultimately, this will end up in the Supreme Court controlled by a Republican or conservative position, but whatever decision they make, still one can then start up with another one. And this will be a continual push on the part of California. Number two, as I've already said, let's get a California convention going so that we can have a nice open discussion with all kinds of Pandora's boxes of strange ideas. That's what you would expect. Number three, let's look ahead to 2026. It's only 2 years. People's attentiveness is pretty minute these days. And so all we really need is to break through, I think, on the, I would say much more on the House of Representatives side. That's pretty close. So maybe one can turn it over. Those are 3 steps I would suggest.
Okay, so
and finally, a point which is much more broad. As you brought up, excuse me, let me finish my thought. Mr. Ruiz Evans, as you pointed out, population of California is over 40% Latino, add 14% and growing Asian. And we're talking about a world that's 56 to 60%, very different from much of the rest of the country, certainly if you cross the Sierras and go into those red states. So that is something that's not going to change, it's going to increase, and that does constitute unique difference
Fair
of
enough,
a culture
fair enough.
and therefore of a politics and possibly of certain decisions in the future. Thank you. Oh, by the way, can I just ask Professor Schaefer, what's the title to your book coming up? I'd like to very much be able to grab it.
Professor Griffiths, what's the title of your book?
You said in 2025, you're bringing out a book on secession. I'd very much like to get a hand on it. What's the title, please?
Unfortunately, the title is a work in progress. Right now, it is tentatively titled American Secession, the Folly of a Red-Blue National Divorce. But,
okay, but it'll be out in 2025.
Yeah, it'll be at the late summer, around August 25 with Oxford University Press.
Oh,
it's a trade book. It's a trade book too. So
okay, fine. Thank you.
Sure.
Small point of information.
Sure.
To the professor's point about a constitutional convention, I want to remind that when we were trying to accomplish this in 2009, 2010, we had 2 ballot measures. One ballot measure gave the people the right to call a convention by initiative. And then the second one was the initiative to call the convention itself. Right now, the state legislature can do it, but the people can't do it by themselves. So the interesting first question is, do we give ourselves that power? And one of the reasons that we had trouble getting the signatures was that the Howard Jarvis Association folks, who were afraid that a constitutional convention would change Prop 13, were telling the signature gathering companies not to work for us because they didn't want us to qualify the measure. So that's a little bit of the politics history to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, we're winding down. I do want to ask people this, though. Let me pull this question up here real quick. So, sorry. I was trying to find a different map. I can't find it, but I'll show you guys this one, and then I'll ask you a question about it. 1 second, sorry. So here's the election map. A lot of places went red. But if you look at the map and the total, you'll notice that a lot of the red is on the right side of the map. And then if you look at the left side of the map, it's almost completely white. Yeah, there's a few red arrows, absolutely. And then when you get to California, it's red only in the top third. The rest is blue, and it increased blue. So
there were close races there.
Absolutely, there were.
And
Absolutely.
you can see, if you look closely, you'll actually see a lot of little red arrows.
Very tiny little red arrows in the middle of a giant sea of white. Absolutely. I'm here in the Central Valley, and Trump did flip some of the districts here. He flipped them from light blue to light pink. So I see a lot of conservatives holding up maps and they go, well, look, if you look at just a red-blue map, it looks like he won a lot. If you look at a degree of win map, you'll notice that he only turned light blue to light pink, mostly here in the Central Valley where I live. But this map shows California is not in alignment with most of America. Most of America went hard red or heavy red, and here we are in the white region with mostly blue. Does that say that we're in line with a future America?
I think identity politics plays a big role in that. I mean, you have a lot of different ethnic groups there in the Central Valley, and they get that false promise from the Democrat Party that tells them, hey, look, we've got someone running that looks just like you. They're going to do the right thing by you. And they continue to fall in line with the Democrat plantation, and they don't really have the ability to see past that, which is really sad. A lot of people do vote based on the color of their skin and stick to their ethnic groups and their roots and heritage. When you see a lot of people around the country that are experiencing a lot of harmful fallout from the Biden regime, you see the drugs that are coming over the border. I mean, just look what's going on in Pennsylvania, for example. You have whole cities that have massive areas of people just of fentanyl zombies. And in California, we have the largest homeless population, and it's not isolated to the major cities. It's throughout the whole region. You can see it in Fresno. You can see it in California. You can see it in the small towns like Fireball. But yes, it's definitely, the state has always been more conservative in the north, and we are seeing it come into the Central Valley. And that's a good thing.
Well,
Can I
I'll
ask
just
a question? Just briefly, if the argument is that people vote by the color of their skin, does that apply to people who have what we call white skin?
I would say ethnic. When I talk about ethnic, like minority groups, these first, second generation.
Right, but is that only true? If you're making that assertion, is that really only true for non-white people?
So here's an example. So like I've met with the Sikh community out there in the Central Valley, and I've also met with the Indian community as well. And a lot of them, believe it or not, are in agriculture. Also the Hmong people as well. And they have historically voted Democrat because that's what they were always taught to do. And the ethnic groups, they do a lot of ethnic gatherings, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, God forbid a bunch of white people got together and said it was a white thing, you'd call that a Klan meeting, right? But when other groups would, it's okay, and there's nothing wrong with these meetings. The point is that when they get together, they talk about the politics, they just go with the same party line. And the Democrats will put a lot of really do nothing candidates that have no policy in front of them that look similar to them and say, hey, it's just like you, vote for them. And there's not a lot of thought that goes into it, unfortunately. And this is coming from someone who's experienced in this field, running around the state, meeting with different groups. Yeah. But when you show people policy and how life is going to get better, they change. And that's why you saw that shift there in the Central Valley. Even though the arrows are small, it's just enough you need to move it the direction it needs to go. And that's more conservative. And don't forget, it's a lot of farmland and a lot less people.
Absolutely. And the majority population is Latino and not Anglo farmers. Additionally, the voting pattern in the Central Valley has been going blue for the last 10 to 15 years. This is the first election where it moved back red. The trajectory looking at demographics is blue. The fact that he only moved it into the light pink suggests that it's a temporary blip. If we look at the elections over the last 15 years, and we look at the largest demographic factor growing is Latin people, and Latin people will typically vote Democratic versus Republican. The trajectory's there. Additionally, a lot of Asians and minorities stopped voting Republican when Trump came out in 2016 and said like Mexicans are rapists. That happened. I was there. I saw the video. Additionally, a lot of Latin people voted against the Republican Party with the introduction of Proposition 187, which Latin people viewed as inherently racist under Pete Wilson. So that's some of it. I just want to get back to this. Does this map say that America's in line with California? Most of America, most of the populated areas red. If you look at California, the majority of California, yes, there are some small red lines, absolutely. But if you look at it from a 30,000 viewpoint, it's mostly white and blue for the bottom 2/3. That doesn't really exist for any other these other states except for maybe, I don't know, New Mexico. Wouldn't that seem to suggest that California is a little bit different? This is open to anybody.
California is a lot different. All you have to do is, like Leo said, go across the map, look at the different states, go to different states. You'll be horrified. I mean, we don't have smoking indoors. And I was in Indiana, and there were people smoking cigarettes at the dinner table. I was horrified. But then I remembered I was in another state. So there's a lot of backwoods and antiquated thought processes still going on in a lot of those states, even though they're contemporary.
Mark, are we coming close to the end, or are we going to have?
Yeah, we're winding down. Okay. I'm going to turn
a bit more.
I'm sorry.
I'd like to say a bit more.
Yeah. I'm going to do a minute and a half for everybody. First, I'm going to go to the two professors. Then I'll go to everybody. We're going to go to Professor Griffiths, then Professor Chytry. Everybody gets a minute and a half for closing comments. Professor Griffith, closing comments. Thank you for coming out, sir.
Yeah. So one general comment, and then I'll just refer to the map. General comment is great to be here. Thanks again, Marcus. It's always truly enjoyable. I always learn a ton, and I appreciate the audience and the different views. And I learn a lot when I hear people's thoughts on these things. That map is super interesting that you just showed. I mean, two thoughts that run in very different directions. One is, and I think somebody said this in one of the chats, that it's important to remember that just shows shifts, not absolute differences. So, this would mean that like Massachusetts usually goes really, really blue, but it looks pretty red, except for the little blue bastion of Boston, I suppose. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And it really makes those Great Lakes states, upper Midwest, look really red, which is a bit of a distortion. That said, what is fascinating about this, and I didn't fully appreciate it until I see this map, is how much Trump gained in those upper Midwest states. What that says in general, I don't know, but the politics seem to be a bit more static, is what I see when I look at this, particularly in the West. It's just not shifting as much. So for some reason, Salt Lake really went crazy blue. That's one of the biggest differences. So a very interesting map. It's a lot. I take away a lot of different things about it, about different shifts in it. Not necessarily that California is so different, that it's like some other places a bit more static in terms of where it is. That's all.
Okay. Professor Chytry, and then we'll continue with everybody else. Professor Chytry, last comments. What do you feel, generally debate, et cetera? And we're going to make sure everybody gets their time. Professor Chytry, what's your comment, sir?
I'm not sure whether your question asked for a comment on the map itself or just general closure.
Both. General closure, general major observations from watching the whole thing. And I appreciate you coming out again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been very enjoyable and instructive. I mean, the map does show that there's a lot of weight going to the area of the Midwest, Republican-wise, and you can't deny that. And that seems to create a situation for the future because, again and again, that was the decisive factor in the 2016 election, and now again in 2024, it's even more clear. So as far as I'm concerned, the map simply confirms that, as you were saying, there's something about the California exception. There are other places that look similar, but there's something distinctive about the California exception, which again is augmented by the fact that, unlike these other states that seem similar, this is a state of enormous economic power. And as I've said several times today, it's on its way to a very different and unique future. And I think that will be increasingly felt as the Trump administration imposes what I consider to be some pretty hard acts generally for the country, but also specifically in opposition to California. I think California is a definite target of Trump's revenge attitudes, which he states very clearly.
Okay, thank you very much. I also want to show everybody this map. As we wind down, we're going to go to Professor. Let's go to Leo next. Leo, you have been a true sport. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for participating. I really appreciate you being part of this. I know it's a little rough. Thank you.
Oh, it's fine. I'm not worried about it. It's just, I really wish people would open their minds and look at a broader perspective and don't let the media hype and the emotions get the best of them. You'll see the major swings there because those are the states that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point targeted because they knew they were the swing states in this election that were going to be the difference maker. Charlie Kirk has talked about how the 2020 election really was decided by about 200,000 voters in about 10 or 11 counties across the nation. And so they put their efforts there. That's why you see big swings in that Rust Belt region, as well as in places like Nevada. I mean, you can even see Oregon has gone more red. But a lot of it, I mean, some of it has to do with Turning Point. I think California stays pretty stagnant because I personally believe the GOP doesn't do a sufficient job. It's definitely the state's GOP doesn't do a sufficient job in promoting conservatism and republicanism here in California, as well as the national party, because they look at it with a lost cause. A lot of organizations that are Republican look at California as a lost cause and not worth the money and the effort, where I wholeheartedly disagree. And we do have an establishment rhino problem in all aspects of the Republican Party, but it is being slowly pushed out by a grassroots conservative uprising, and that is taking place, and you can see that across the country. I really think that Californians are going to be just fine. Don't worry about it. Trump is not going to take away your rights. I've said this 1,000 times, and I'm going to continue to say it because he will not take away your rights. You're going to be able to be fine. In fact, you're going to do so much better with the amount of money that you have in your pocket because things are going to get cheaper. And California, it needs help. It needs Republican leadership. And I'm looking forward to bringing that to everybody.
We're going to go to is this a political campaign here? Are we discussing matters, or are we just?
I mean, here,
that's all you're doing.
Well, so what's that, Professor?
It would be nice if the Republican Party ever turned back to conservatism. I'm perfectly aware of the conservative position over 50 years, and I see very little of it, if anything, in the present regime run by Trump. So don't instruct me on what conservatism is.
Well, we're talking about common sense more than anything, but conservatism.
Now you're insulting people's intelligence. Get out of here.
Okay, all right.
We've lost common sense. When you can't figure out which bathroom.
Sense is not common to everybody. Everybody doesn't have it.
Well, the
Let's
one thing
be
about
clear.
common sense is that it's truly uncommon. That's the sad reality.
We're going to go to Professor Hanink, and then I'm going to show you all a new map. Professor Hanink, your comments. Professor Griffiths and Chytry, please don't leave. I want to show you a new map and get your opinion. Professor Hanink, for about a minute and a half, thoughts, feelings about the whole thing?
All right. For the most part, we didn't get much deeper than you'd find in the op-ed section of the Los Angeles Times. And that's sad. I think we can get much deeper than that. We need to do some serious political thinking, some serious political philosophy. There is a party that is trying to do that, the American Solidarity Party. Both the left and the right are interested in our not being heard. I'm very glad that Mark makes an exception in that regard. I would encourage, and this is how I ended with the first panel, I would encourage everybody to think long and hard about just what would count as a consistent ethic of life, and to think long and hard about what's involved in policies that would advance the common good, keeping in mind that there's no guarantee that democracy of the sort that we have will do that. One might hope, but we have to keep in mind that we are in a very perilous situation. And I would encourage everyone to take a long look every time you get a chance at the Bulletin for Atomic Scientists. Well worth looking at. And I would encourage from time to time that people reflect on the fact that since Roe versus Wade came into play, approaching now 80 million unborn babies have been killed.
Okay. I will point out, thank you, Professor. Thank you for coming out. I will point out that California is very, very strongly a pro-abortion state. I'm not taking a side on that. I'm just putting that out there. There's a variety of opinions Californians have that we see. I'm sorry? Oh, pro-abortion right. Yes, I apologize. Pro-abortion right state. I'm simply saying there's a thing called California values. They're held by about 65 to 75% of the population. It is what it is. Veronica, we're going to go to you in just a minute. If I can ask you to hold on for a second, I want to show the professors this map. I showed you this map. This was the change. This was the map I was looking for. So this is the election. You'll notice across America, red, wow, deep red. And then you get to California and it turns solid light pink, like a hardcore wall. The moment you get to Cali, hardcore red to light pink. Where you find hardcore red? The top north, like we said with this map. So when you look at this map, I'm noticing mostly a deep red America. And then you get to California and we turn suddenly light pink. Doesn't that suggest some sort of difference, considering that almost doesn't happen for any of those states? I mean, you could look at Washington, maybe Maine, New York. But when we're looking at size and you're just looking at this, and I study maps for a living, I see a gigantic sea of deep red. And then when I get to California, it suddenly goes stark, hardcore light pink. Does that suggest the difference between California and the American national sentiment, or nothing like that could be taken from this map? Professor Chytry and then Professor Griffiths, and then we'll go back to you, Veronica.
Well, it seems like the conventional expectation that you have the blues in California, but also, as you see, there's plenty of space there for Colorado, New Mexico, and parts of Arizona. Then swinging over to the right, you've got the New England states that have stood firmly also on a more, I would say, democratic liberal front. So in general terms, I would say that shows larger patterns, not necessarily that California stands out in that way. But certainly California is important, though, because, again, of its size, its population, and all the rest of it. And then as you go on up, you can see Washington and Oregon. And I've already mentioned that all three states voted something like 56-39 for Harris.
Yeah, you certainly can see that. Washington, California, looks like New Mexico, Colorado, maybe Maine, New York, but for 46 other states, or 45 basically not. But yes,
yeah, I agree.
on the West
agree.
Coast, absolutely. Professor Griffiths, and then we're going to wrap up with Veronica. Professor Griffiths, what do you see when you look at this map, Professor?
So I think this is all by congressional district. And I mean, what it does show is just that Republican districts are bigger because of they tend to be more rural. And so you get this sea of red with the archipelago of blue. I've constructed the same map on the county level, and it's even more of a sea of red with lots of little blue dots everywhere. The blue to red ratio is highest in the areas that we know it's high. It looks good. It's high in California, although you do have the big counties up north, and it's kind of pinkish in the middle. But I mean, it shows a difference, but by degree, not a difference in kind, right? Because if you look at Massachusetts and New England, it's quite blue. Massachusetts might even have a claim to greater blueness than California. But I take the point, Marcus, that when you show it up against that sea of red that you get in the, in this, albeit with lots of blue in it, it does show more of a blue state, a blue pattern, and a difference by degree. I take that. Yeah.
We're going to go to Veronica. Thank you, Professor.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Then I have to go to Veronica, and then I have to go to Mike. Professor Chytry for 1 minute.
Can I just make a quick comment, very quick, on the global level? Putin and his followers have pushed this ideology of what they call the telluric, that is to say, the landmass, versus the thalassic, that is to say, the coastal sea areas. And in many ways, it's an interesting map because it shows, again, the Republican side is all about the telluric, the great landmass, and again, the Democratic side is definitely thalassic along the coasts. Just a small pointer.
Okay. Veronica, for about 1.5 minutes, and then we're going to go to Mike. What thoughts, comments, feelings, observations, etc.?
Well, I know living here in California, I've been warned, be careful going too far north of Sacramento because the KKK is up there, and to watch myself. California, as I see it, I think that all the people that are here, the nation is scared of the browning of America. That's the bottom line. That's what apartheid was, the same kind of thing. And then when they switched over and gave it to blacks, like Nelson Mandela, it changed the scheme of things and the way things worked in politics. It's the same thing here in the United States. We're having Trump is on one side, but there's parties in between that. And we need to find a common harmony. I can assure you as a nurse, and Jim, I want to tell you that I was a nurse in an abortion. And the thing that came out of the young lady when I was in Chico State was not a baby. It was not a baby. It could have been a baby, but it was not a baby.
Probably angled by the time it got out.
I'm sorry, we're winding down. Veronica gets her piece, and then we're going to go to Mike. Sorry.
And so the way that things are here, I think we need to look at the bigger picture. And while Leah was talking about common sense, all sense is not common. And the people that are pushing the fear of people of color, from immigrants, from Islamists, everybody, they're making people afraid of the people that are their neighbors. And I can assure you, as a nurse and as an end-of-life nurse, that when people die, they all die the same way. Their eyes roll in the back of their head, their mouths fall open, and they take that last tidal breath that comes out of their body, and they're officially dead. They don't breathe again. Everybody is human, and we keep missing that factor. And when we talk about all these things that apply to us, it's very scary to me as a human being.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go to Mike. Mike
Yeah.
Feinstein.
Yeah, thanks.
Thoughts, opinions, please. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to close in part by responding to those maps and mention before the two professors joined us, I argued that our response in California needs to be to improve the quality of life and to be more inclusive. And on the point of being more inclusive, these maps, by showing only blue and red, give a false understanding about the real political diversity in the state. And when I ran for Secretary of State in California in 2018, I campaigned on a state of regions proportional representation plan where we had essentially the MMP system like Germany and New Zealand, where half the seats are elected proportionally and half through individual single seat districts, which I argued by ranked choice voting. And the 8 multi-county proportional representation regions would be a way of bringing in the actual economic and land diversity that we have, but have multiple visions from those areas that it wouldn't be just Democrats and Republicans, but Greens, Libertarians, and others. And because there is a lawsuit now entered that I think will get top 2 elections thrown out, I would love to see us convene a constitutional convention to be looking at replacing the single seat winner take all system that we have and look at different models of proportional representation for the state in a widely inclusive process that involved technology so that millions of people in the state could hear what a body that would make up a constitutional convention along a civic assembly model would be debating. And I'd love to see us go in that direction next and do that rather than the legislature just having us go back to the old single seat district system that we had before after California loses top 2. Thanks.
Okay. Leo, I'm going to give you an additional minute just because you've been a really good sport. So additional minute to Leo, and then we're going to wrap it up. And I'm only doing this because Leo was called out a couple of times. I want to say thank you for coming out. And I want to do my best to make sure that you were heard and your arguments were heard unedited. That's the best I could do. Leo, final minute.
I don't know if everybody really listened to what I had to say, and they just kind of took the rhetoric nonsense into play, the mainstream sort of rhetoric where what I say can be misconstrued. So it's not about that. We're here because California is part of the country. Trump is going to be the president. He's going to make things better for all of us. And Californians don't need to be afraid of a Trump presidency. Your rights aren't going away. You're not going to be a target. The KKK isn't a thing. I haven't seen them show up for any of these things. They're not around harassing people. White privilege isn't a thing. What we're seeing here is an absence of meritocracy and a focus on things that are completely topical and have nothing to do with substance. If we're going to have a society that's built on greatness and will ever achieve greatness, it's going to require a meritocracy. People who are qualified and deserve to be there. Nitpicking social issues are only going to distract us from the real issues that are at hand. Right now, our country is in $36 trillion of debt. Our state is in over $3.5 trillion of debt. We are borrowing money from next year's budget every single year. We just passed propositions in the state to allow us to borrow more money, bond measures. We're going to borrow $40 billion for one of these bond measures. It's going to take us 40 years to pay it back. It comes with interest. We are not doing well from an economic standpoint. We have the highest taxes for a state in the nation. We are not using our money responsibly. We have broken roads. We have the highest homeless population in the nation. And the one thing that we certainly do have a lot of in our legislative house is Democrats. You can't find one elected Republican in the San Francisco area, and that town is full of human feces and drugs and decay and depression. So we have a lot of things to improve here. And I think taking a Republican presidency of Donald Trump, someone who's motivated to do the right thing, we should learn from the progress that we are going to see. There's no regression here of your rights. There's no erosion of your liberties. You're going to see more freedom and more capital to be that person, to be a strong, independent person. And don't forget that people that come here illegally have committed a crime, and they should be returned to the countries that they come from. They should, if they choose to leave on their own accord, then they're not going to obviously be prosecuted. Then they can reapply to come here the proper way. We want immigrants. We want it done the right way. We want people to be vetted. That's it. But don't freak out. It's only 4 years. You'll be fine.
Okay, we got to stop there. Thank you all for coming here. I know there's more comments. We're going to end it here because we try to keep it a solid thing. Thank you all for coming here. And I really appreciate it. 1 second. Thank you everybody for coming here. Now my final comments. Well, you saw it here. I'm not saying what the results were, but we talked to people from outside of California. We talked to people on the left and the right here in California, more people on the left, but definitely some people from the right. And what I'm seeing is there was no agreement found. People have strong opinions that they're going to be attacked. And then other people have strong opinions that there's nothing to worry about. He's just making comments. It's not going to happen. The honest answer is that we don't know. We're taking stances on opinions of if this guy's going to do what he says. Half of us seem to think he won't. Half of us seem to think he will. We're not going to know till that time. I know that people wanted this to go another way, and I know it was a little bit hectic and confrontational, but I think this is also a sign of where we're at, right? I mean, we immediately started going at it. I just had to drop some light tinder on the ground and poof, fire. And the range of opinions was like, it's like this. I don't care what you say. Well, it's like this. I don't care what you say. That's what I saw. I saw polarization in America and in California on display right here in front of everybody seeing. Now, 40% of California voted for Trump. I think he got a boost because of economics. California is still largely 2/3 liberal, 1/3 conservative, but it's still there. Who knows what the future holds? But I think this was literally a survey, in my opinion, that there's no agreement. He's going to come and get us. Nah, nothing to worry about. He's just talking. And I know I'm oversimplifying, but I noticed there was a complete lack of connection between those two polls. So it's going to be interesting. And I think that the future here in California is going to be very kinetic and dicey based upon what I've seen. We'll leave it there. Thank you all for coming out. I know there's more comments. I'll set up a second meeting, but we got to leave it there. Professor, did you comment real quick, super quick, 30 seconds? Or are you just waving goodbye? Okay.
I'm just saying it was great to join everybody. I enjoyed it. Even Mr. Saki's comment. I was amazed.
I thank everybody for coming.
Ideas. So thank you for this occasion.
I thank everybody for being here because it was interesting. It was challenging.
We'll leave it there. Thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it. I hope you all felt that I tried my best to make sure everybody was heard.
You did a great job, Marcus.
So
great work.
We'll leave it. Thank you. I'll send you all a copy of the video later. Thank you all for coming.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.